and the Deputy Chair of the Tatou Vai Select Committee. We have the Honourable Tariffs Mawate. On my far right, Member of Parliament for Amuri Uriia in Aitutaki. The Honourable Tehani Brown, Member of Parliament for Tangatangi Areora Ngati Arua in Atiu. The Honourable Albert Nicholas, Member of Parliament for Ruatonga Awatiu, Palmerston Atupa. The Honourable Patrick Arioka, Member of Parliament for Muri Enua, and the Honourable Agnes Armstrong, the Member of Parliament for Ivirua Mangaya. It has been questioned, why do we have Outer Island Members of Parliament on the Select Committee? And the simple answer is, these are Members of Parliament that have been elected by the Parliament onto this committee. And in addition, all of these Outer Island Members of Parliament are also landowners on Rarotonga. Our officials with us this evening to assist the committee with our review and consultation of the bill are the Tatou Vai Limited officials, Mr. Greg Longman, Chief Executive of the Tatou Vai. We have the Chairman of the Board, Mr. Brian Mason. We have Mr. Sam Napa Senior, who is a board member. We have Mr. Walter Tuarai White, who is the Director of Public Relations. And we have our Parliament Secretariat staff. We have Janine Daniel, the Acting Clerk of Parliament here. Margaret Numanga, who is the Committee Secretary of the Select Committee. And also we have with us the Hansard Unit of Parliament, Tai Manavaro, the Editor of Debates, Janet Brown, the Hansard Recorder, and Unuia, our technician. And of course also we have here our translator with us for tonight's consultation, Te Noa Puna. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge also the Speaker of the House, the Honourable Nikki Rattle, who has joined us here. And alongside our team tonight is the representatives from Te Marae Ora, Ministry of Health, Dr. Te Api Uka, and also the Solicitor General from the Crown Law Office, Mr. Stuart Baker. To begin with, and to assist the Hansard with the recordings, when we do start, could each speaker please clearly state for the record your full name, your title, either in the landowner or the catchment area, or the organization you're representing, or if you're representing yourself as an individual. There will be 3 microphone stands we can see around the room. If you wish to speak, please just raise your hand and indicate you'd like to speak and move to the closest microphone that's closest to you. So before we start, may I just briefly say that the Parliamentary Tatou Vai Select Committee was formally established by Parliament on the 8th of July this year to review the Tatou Vai Authority Bill and report back to Parliament on the 30th of September. The expressions of interest for submissions on your views on the Tatou Vai Authority Bill have been advertised and announced on our radio talkback shows over the last few weeks. We wish to advise and encourage members of the public to download an e-copy of the bill and explanatory notes from the parliamentary website or the parliamentary Facebook page, or to collect a copy from the Tatou Vai office in Takuwaene, or submit your submissions to our Committee Secretary, Margaret Numanga, or just simply call her at the Parliament for guidance and advice. As you can see, we have quite a tight schedule, and already we have received submissions and requests for presentations from various organizations and groups. The closing date for submissions on the Tatou Vai Authority Bill will be on Friday, the 11th of September. So it's a couple of months away, to give people plenty of time to put their submissions to the Select Committee. Before I hand over to our TTV officials for their presentation tonight, there's a couple of things that I will run through with you. Firstly, from the previous meetings, there seems to be some confusion over Tatou Vai and Tatou Vai. So for the purpose of explanation, Tatou Vai is the name of the project that was for upgrading of our water systems, the ring main and the intakes up in the mountains. That is a project that was awarded to McConnell Dowell to complete. It was overseen by a second company called GHD, but this project and this company was responsible for the building of all of the structures in our intakes. This project has a life, it will end at the end of this year. So Tatou Vai will finish, and then Tatou Vai will take over the management and operation of our water system. Also, from the result of our previous two meetings, there were a number of areas in the Act that have been commented on, and the Select Committee have already decided that will be included in their report. And these are to do with Section 66C, which we have agreed will be removed. And there will be amendments that will be made to Section 66A and B, and also Section 29(2) and Sections 58 and 63. I would ask that those speakers who have spoken in the Te Awatonga meeting and also last night at the Puekura meeting to please allow those who have not spoken before to have a chance to speak, because we have captured your words in the recordings of the Hansard. So by standing up and talking again, we have a third copy if you're going to say the same thing. I'd also like to remind our officials to please make sure you speak clearly into our microphones so that our people can hear clearly what we are going to talk about. Okay, I think we are done with our introductions. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to the Tatou Vai officials to begin their presentation.
Me te katupaka Tatou Chairman e tō komiti ngatete. Kia ora na Tatou kātoto e te aiai. O Walter Tuarai wai tō kuingoa e rarea nao ngā Tatou Vai. E te maisa takiau e no nei matawera te tuatau. Te mea mō, kia me te kei kōtō kātoto ngō te taimai te aiai. Ki uriru mana ko tātou ngorunga e te apira. Tō tātou waa autara mō o Papa Sam Napa. Ka kapapa mai e te kapuanga pai rarotonga nei. E pera kōtō tukuanga te paipa ki roto te one. Te kawea tu vai tātou oire. Nei mō mai e taimai ki te tuatau.
Kia ora tātou pōrua te aiai. Tō koingo Sam Napa, tangata arurangeu. E muanga ka tutau tāko ka tutau. Roto te design tu Tatou Vai te matawai. Ko te tai te toru engineer i roto rira e te company GHC o Australia ko rātou te ronga mea o tōtoru mātou. So i roto te akapapanga nā tātou te pō. Ti te mene ko pati mea ki o kore te member o te board o te TTV. Nā muanga ka re tātou ki te apengarea ke ki te marama tātou te oonuanga o tō Tatou Vai. Te matai ki tātou te matai te tauisine waro ane rungo mātoru te me te wangerea konei. Me te tauisine waro ane re angau marima. Ako tupui e te aronga a kaere tātou pasere koe ki tātou iarike e te ui matai pa, te rongomana. So, I rātou i kiri, no te mea ngare e rongo ngā community re te mea, a ka tuku rātou te ture karanga e te O Empowering Act. I rira, nā te iti tangata e ere e maanti i tōpunga, te matara, te ana, e te wai atua. Nā, no runga o kiri e tanga i tamua ere e te o pūpaipa, a ki tātou i kiri e te tika anga i rātou te rau me te wai i te atu ino ko rātou rea te akatika te e pangia rawe me te wai no te istanga. Nā, agar tātou i re ki runga te rā mea koe i runga te board, ka auke o ke re ka take o te tātou ki runga o ke te mataiti 1907, te mitara ere e roto i te urupu tangatini a ka ere. Nā rātou i akono o te tai tango nunga te tātou wai. Wata.
You will note upon, kia ora ana. You will note upon Walter Tatou Vai, Tatou Vai. You will note upon our screen, 1907, Rarosonga Water Supply Regulation Ordinance. And domestic water charge there for $2 per annum.
Nune, a me tātou re ki runga te perakoto e taumata i tere e te 1907, i rira e akamana e te ture atu matara. Te ture atu matara te ki te ne tātou e re, no tire tuato i akono e te akato ki te ne maani e te matara i eramai tātou nā uroa mai e 10 mita o ki te rira.
In the same year, 1907, the Rarosonga Roads Ordinance Act was put in place. You can see to set up our roads around the island to about 10 metres wide.
Nā, nek me tātou re te mata i tia i koni te 1915, ako mana e te ture karanga e tātou te Principal Act, 1915, ai tango ke re re e te 1917, me ka ere koe runga te inua te itstangata ka patiko te itikanga nao.
So in 1908, the Alienation of Lands Ordinance was created. So therefore, if you went on to native lands, you had to get consent.
Mata i ti tau, 1952 ti rira, me kaimumo wai, me kaimumo te tangata ka koutunga e rātou, e pera koutua tano tanu e tuanga rata ino rātou, me te rori ua te pō ki te orono i pōpongi.
In 1917, the Rarosonga Water Ordinance Act was put in place. In 1952, there was an amendment. Offence to wastewater and agricultural use was restricted to 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning.
Nā, nika mai tātou re ki te mata i te 1960, i rira te me te rea kamana i te Rarotonga Waterworks Ordinance, koe i o te ane tātou i raro i rea.
In 1960, the Rarotonga Waterworks Ordinance was set up, which we are pretty much continuing until about today.
Nā, mai akarokoto i rea te temi, akanoa i te water rates. The water rates i kone e ono paunu te mataiti. E commercial rate te tai, e mea te rea tō maurua, tāra te rea i te mataiti.
In the same year, they set up a water tariff. Domestic water rates was about £6 per annum, about $128 in today's terms. Commercial water rates was about £12 per annum and $256 in today's terms.
Nā, tā me tātou rei te mataiti 1972, i rira o tipua e papa arapati te water rates, ka rau ki i tipua na te commercial. Nā rua te ronga tāanga ne tātou wai ki muni, ka rātou i mea i tipua.
In 1972, there was an amendment by Sir Albert Henry. Domestic water rates was repealed. However, commercial water rates was legally payable.
Nā, ka tātou rea te mea te manamanata o tō tātou wai. Koe uke me te me ua ka ki te koutou te aia wanare, wai te ka roko mea ka te amai. Me te me moro, o te rai te manamanata ki tātou tua katau, i te rā tutu ko. I te rea te me reo ki, no tā te komani rāwanga i te tauturi tātou, o orongo mai e te subsidize e tere te rua tauisini tanka wai o na tauisini lita. E roto tiria, me ako putu e tirira, e ono era, e ta omaru era million liters of whey in storage.
The images up on your screen is of Avana intake, the most productive intake here in Rarotonga. The image on your left, as you can all see, is the wet season, and there's plenty of water flowing over that weir. To your right is the dry season, when it's very, very low up there, and it puts pressure on our water system. In the same year, the government put out to help out people in times of drought. The government subsidised tanks to the tune of about 2,000 for households across Rarotonga to help them store water.
Nā newe tātou rea akara tātou rea te wai I roto I tō tātou mea. Ia pēa te aranga te wai I te anga I tātou. Nā akara koto te mea murumura. Tānangai aramai angai nā ngatangi ia, nā titikawa kai taini, aroro I arorangi ko I te Black Rock.
Up on the image on the board, you'll note the areas in red. That's from Awana intake. As you can see, it runs all the way from Awana all the way down to Black Rock.
Nā tō tūrangi rea te mea mati e tūkatau, akara me te koto, aroro mai te wai e te ngā I matawera, ako mutu e kiriro.
The part in green is from Turangi intake, and it runs all the way across the coast from Matavera down to Tupapa.
So tera mea ware awara no mea tiri no takuen tiri an mei tei ko tāna ngai tera angai me koe te kauwai I awatiu ki koe te matara I te tua matawera I te ngai tuporo tupapa.
The maroon colour is from Takawaine, feeding the town areas and through Havachu and down to the hava at Trader Jack's.
Nā te tō matawera e tupapa, nā rawa angai na auta I tera rea tera kara e orange pa me brown.
The orange section is from Tupapa and Matavera, which predominantly feeds the back roads of those two districts.
So ameria tō awatiu, ara mai e tanga angai mai e Nikau, e tanga akamutu e tō awana I Black Rock, tāna tuanga tiri.
The yellow area is from Havachu intake that feeds the districts of Nikau, some parts of Havachu, and ends at Black Rock.
Nā tērā mea light blue, tērā mea maratea wika, I tō tātou iria tō arorangi, o auta tērā iria tō Papua mai ngā toe rutaki, nā ne anga maintiri.
The blue area is from Ngātoe intake, Taipara, Papua, and that feeds the most of the back road areas from Rutaki right through to Aorangi.
Okay, pasiat mima.
To Tatou Vai bill purpose. Te akoroanga o te pira o Tatou Vai. To operate, manage and maintain a reliable public water supply system for the people of Rarotonga. Tia ture e kamana, te kopapa Tatou Vai, o te akatereanga, te tiakianga, e te akono, I te vai o te istangata Rarotonga nei. To be self-funding and not make a profit. Ki riro lai ngā te kopapa, e tūtaki tōna ka tere ngā te au rā, kāre e ke me moni. Pera katoa, ia katoa atu, e te ngāte te au atu e noa o te ngā e koi e kapu ngā mai o te vai. Ki rurai te kōpapa, te akamako e tāna ka tere anga, I te company I roake, I te mata o te Cook Islands Investment Board.
Sorry. Greg Longman, Tatou Vai Chief Executive. On the screen you'll see a representation of, or a chart of Rarotonga, and the blue line represents a 30-metre contour. This is defined... Oh, sorry.
Te tūtui ki te me tātou inua, te kara koto te alaini aketa, me kore pulu ngā te papaa. Hosirida, it turun at the night, turun urmita. Mirometa, Kuta, turun urmita.
From the sea level to the blue contour at 30 metres is defined as the full service zone in Section 5 of the bill.
Kutinga de Agataya, Mirometa, Kuta, turun urmita. Kutia, the night, Yakatono, ya. It's good the way, it ran at each data in what Tatou no.
This full service zone is the area where Tatou Vai is obliged to supply a service pressure of water.
Kutia, I vai to ya, Itamaro ya. Kataya to the way, Mirometa, Kuta, Itianga, Ite. Kimaranga the vai Kuta. It
is a calculated line or contour giving consideration for the different intake elevations for the 10 intakes around the island.
Taikiro the Tai, Kaogio Guta. Mirato, Tarato, Tamarorato, at Matavai to my, at your engineer. Me Okita Guta. Kamana Oya, get tired of Girum Urmita.
And it encompasses a majority of the dwellings on the island.
Within Tato, Mirati about to try to get by Tai, Kuzira than I and non Tato is not.
Project of the motorway, Tango Pupo, Agano, Takaoe, the committee here. Kitatori to the Tango Pupo, Tango catchment. The two are not the catchment that we could do Karangane boundary, catchment boundary. They Harite the Tato land boundary, catchment boundary, the Kennedy, Aganoia, no the two are not the Paruanga Yauta, the Pupo. The night they are Rutuio. Akitatoria, the Hono, Arukato, the Pupecato Tango, Kao Puro, the catchment boundary, the Pragotrum Tato Piro. So, under the motorway project, there's 10 intakes and 10 catchment boundaries that's been set. And they all starts from the intake, which is the first infrastructure, moving towards up into the ridge of the mountains. Tamaturega Harametato, Akaranga Tato no Tepoco, Havana, Kitatos de Pupepa Matate, Pupepa Medicate, Ridunate, Angami, Harimere and Rone, and Roman, Nangating, and Natica Aronget. May Akarato de Ahono Lonte, Havana, Mutoromito, Aromekite, Kitato, Midtai, Anirimita, Tato Pupep. The Ahono, the catchment boundary. Koyo Yamatamato, the Tuanga or the intake, Areomay, Aronate, the sedimentation tank, the Tanga, the filtration, Koauto, the Koroma, the Goni, Koyoki, the Akarangite, Ngai, Kariro May, Kapumay, the way, the Karamegutato intake, not the Meko, the Ngai, the Kanatato, Paru Tato, Makari, Kajime Tato, the Hang, Irritated Tato Wo. The Hanono Ite. They two are now a mother at least your mother at Inua, the Rogata to the Tangang, Iraroke, the infrastructure. Then I have two areas, the Akita to a Remanantaro, the Yangai, not the mayor to the infrastructure, would add the way now to the paper. Arunga, the Ngai Kakapong away, could take the Ngai, the Yamata, the Akara Meditato, the Tuno, the catchment boundary. Oteria Tato, Akarne, the Honone. So the Hanongo, the catchment boundary, Arati me a Tamanakuai, Agarodato, the Nagone, Nagomere. Te Garu, you with the Arang with the Mung, under the contour. Arung with the Arang with the Mung, no more the Tucket, and I take a economic way, Milwoman, you tell you, me ke me te vai o te tra ngai ka ere pūru ko te ngai o te intake. Nori aka nui aka pena, ki tau te au te awana, e o peka ere te iu te iria. Me ua mea te pēi te tue matawera, ka eke me te rāwai, ka nāroto i te intake. Te te ngai ua ti pēki teia ke te intake, ka te me te vai, ka re matoi aka o tara ki roto i te catchment boundary. Ta mato ngai ui akara ko te ngai ka noo ki roto i te, ka o me te vai ki roto i te pai, ngai kakapunga waia, roto i te intake. So we decided to set the boundaries along the ridge and also along the contours to ensure that the water coming through the intakes is captured within the catchment. Nō te mea ki tātou ako neka ka nō me te o catchment committee ko te iria te o atu inua ka riro nā rato akarakara mo te tio mai e te nganga ere ka roko e te akatupu i roto i te o. Ki tātou ria e te o pūpepa me takoen e o kumisi tō rato e rawea nō te mea e tauntonua nā pēkiuta ke te pūpepa. I nara e wakatere ngā tā rātou, te riro i te akakara i te paruru, i te uatu anganga te ka tupu ia. Nō te mea tā tātou anganga karawe i uta i ria, ka o mai tiri roto i te, ka ike mea rea tiri roto i te vai ia. Nō rea te vai rea me tāme ko te intake, te ngai kakapunga vai, ka riro te rea me roto tātou paipa. E tuku ere me nao te system, e tuku ere me ki te, riro e vai unu no tātou. So nō rea matu akono i te catchment boundary, ka reti i te kena e, i te akaneke ere me andau mi tātou kena inua. Te kena inua nā tātou rea tiri ako no. Are nā mato. Te ua te catchment boundary ua te. I te akairi me tā mato ngai akara ki mata ki te tātou runga ki te ngai. No te mea, whatever we do in here will affect the water coming down into our streams and especially into our intake. Thank you.
Brian Mason, Chair, Tatou Vai. In earlier meetings, we have given a presentation going through the Act, or the bill, but we very quickly realised that many people had read the bill, they understood it, but they didn't necessarily agree with it. So we thought we'd start off by indicating to you some of the issues that have been raised by the public.
Mo te tātou ipa ngai te ngā pō e te pākene, te pō rui rua, e te rui tōrena pō, i pō e kura, e te autonga. Wa ki te mātou e, wa te tangata te tātou isanata e te pira. Mo re, te aiai, wa paimai mātou e tā rātou i manako e tā rātou i mana tā rātou, ki akapoto mai mo te aiai.
In section 66A and B, many landowners expressed concern that the boundaries of the catchment or the valleys may be changed. The objective was really just to make sure no one got left out.
Tō koto i te irawa o ngoro maono, e te pi, o tieni e kua taui e tirira.
So the suggestion at the moment, subject to your comments, is that you can add a title to a boundary if it has been left out, but you can't change the catchment boundary, you can't change the valley boundary, and you can't take out landowners who are already in.
O tia tā mātou i tā marako, pe atua mua o tei, ka tāro ki roto. Haere ko tia tata i e kapaita i pō i wō, e ka aka neke neke, te kena o te boundary.
Okay, next one. There was concern expressed at the possibility of the CEO of Tatou Vai being the catchment committee for uninvestigated land pending an appointment by the minister. Consequently, we have Ngātoi, for example, which is all uninvestigated land, and the proposal there is that that section be changed so that those persons under native custom entitled to the rights in the customary land, because customary land is recognised, may appoint 5 and not more than 7 persons who shall be the catchment committee, but they have 24 months within which to do that, and if they fail, the board of Tatou Vai can make that appointment. Now you will notice in... Oh, sorry.
I was about to do that one.
Yeah. customary owners will appoint 5 to 7 members.
Akar tātou te irawa te o marema, rua ka tau I a tirere. O tira tū te o atu mua.
You will have noticed that there is 4 months within which the meetings of assembled owners of titled lands can appoint their representatives to the catchment committee. Yeah. This is clearly too short. 4 months to appoint the catchment committee? Do you understand?
No.
I'm there too.
Okay, 24 months, eh?
Yeah, forget about that.
Okay.
Okay.
So what are you saying?
Right, and that will be changed. Yeah. The next slide. Concern was expressed that although Tatou Vai will pay for the meetings of assembled owners, it should also have the responsibility for calling those meetings.
Ko te rere te tai tāmana ko anga ere ki tūna I te paramani e kia oronga te tikanga ki te kopapa aka aere kia kapiki I te tai uipaanga e roto I te tai tuatau tikai no te uipaanga anga ki te atu eno tātātou I mātou I te kete e ko te assemble owners kia iki mai te tai namano rātou me roto I te komiti kakapu.
And the period of time in which they need to be called will be extended because of the court's backlog of meetings of assembled owners.
E ko te tuatau rere e aga tina mau I ai te tuatau no te uipaanga ka topatopatu te rere ki muri no te mea e mata te uipaanga I aga no ia te ka kapiki ia e te agawaanga o te enua.
Next slide. Just to talk to the principle briefly, in most countries, catchments for water are owned by the government or the Crown.
E tutu aga marama ki a tātou I roto I te ai, ko te au enua I waoa ki a tātou, ko te au ngā I kakapu vai I roto I te au enua te rarua ki te rera I te korona.
On Rarotonga, all land in the catchments for our water is privately owned.
I Rarotonga nera I a tātou, ko te au enua e te runga te au kakapu wai nei ko te au ona, ko te au atu enua rai.
The request of landowners in the catchments
Ko te patianga me te au atu enua I runga I te au enua kakapu wai,
has been that they voluntarily place limits on their use of land
e kia vai to ia tā rātou aka pōpinga anga I tō rātou enua,
to ensure the quantity and the quality of water for the people of Rarotonga.
ko te tūmora, ke rauka te oranga anga mai I te vai mitaki no tātou.
Generally, the response has been, we will do this,
Ko te akarongorongo anga, te ariki nei te tangata,
but we will control it ourselves.
e nā rātou rai e aka tere I te rera.
For this reason,
E no te rera tumu,
any person who wants to undertake any activity
ko te tai wātu tangata te ka inangaro I te rawe I te tai wātu tū anganga,
in any catchment
I te ngai aka takakoropini mai I te ngai kakapu wai,
which may impact on the quality or quantity of water that can be retrieved from the catchment,
e ka riro I te tāmana manata me kore I te tākino I te vai e kakapu I nei ki roto I te kakapu wai,
including Tatou Vai,
ka piti katoa atu te aronga anganga o tō tātou wai,
must receive the approval of the catchment committee,
ka anono ia ki rawe ia mai te akatika anga a te kumiti kakapu wai,
made up of landowners,
te anga ia mai te o atu enua,
before anything can be done.
I moa ke ka rawe ia atu I te tai au tū anga.
Okay, next slide. That me? Some members, landowners, have expressed concern that they have many landowners on their title.
Ko te tai o te atu enua ere i aka ki te mai rātou, tuku mai rātou e o atu enua ke atu rai te tai mata atu i runga i te au enua.
And they will find it difficult to agree on any one person.
E mata o ki a rātou e kare rātou e ariki ana e o tai ua tangata no te mata i a rātou.
This point was raised by Lindsay Francis and Noeline Brown.
Ua tai ku ia mai e te tai ngā waine ko Lindsay Francis e prātua Noeline Brown.
And of course, it's hard to disagree with it.
Ngata rai I te pātu ia tuirao.
But we also have the dilemma that, for example, on Tatou Vai,
Tērā te tai manamanta no runga I te ngā e kakapuai o Tatou Vai ne.
we have 12 titles.
E tenga oru marua au enua tūkeke.
Sorry, more than that. But if you have 3 members for every title,
Me te
then,
mea e ka apai mai tātou I te tai enua o tai e toru tangata me reira.
then the committee becomes too large.
Hakaranga tā urere ko ia tika e te mata o te mata o te kumiti.
Suggestions to, on how to manage this would be welcome.
Ubi, e tāmana ko angai re te tai e kia, kimi mai te tai rāwenga e kakape e te akatere angai tere.
Next slide. The catchment committees, when elected, the cost of electing the catchment committees will be paid for by Tatou Vai,
Ko te akapau anga, tutaki ki te aru kumiti o te kakapu wai,
and
e tutaki anga ki te au atu enua, nā te Tatou Vai terera e tutaki.
and their fees and allowances to be determined by regulation will be paid for by Tatou Vai.
E ko te tutaki anga te ka oronga e ke rātou, kakatina mō ia nāruto I te tai au ture iti no te akatetera anga e tutaki ai.
Finally, I just would make the point that where you have the catchments and below that you have the infrastructure, the intakes which are subject to the Rarotonga Water Ordinance and the Infrastructure Act.
E nā rau ki te tātou e ko te au kakapu wai, te uwai e tae mai nei ki raro, kua kakapu ia e te tai kakapu wai, e ko te akamōanga o te au wai nei, te roto I te tai ngā ture o te norunga I te turanga o te vai, e paragatoa I te ture o te infrastructure.
But the catchments themselves are not covered by the Infrastructure Act, so this bill provides that the majority of landowners need to consent if we're to do anything in the catchment.
Ko te ngā e kakapu wai anga rā, kāre te ture o te infrastructure e arapaki atu ki rātou, nā te ia ture tāmana ko rai e akatakataka no runga I te rira puputangata.
Okay, next slide. Another issue raised by the public is the concern that you have to be connected to the network.
Ko te tai manamana tā te akarongo I e mātou I te ngā pō I area mai, ko te tutua I ia e kia tāmou ia, tōpiri ia tātou kirunga I te wai.
And that is set out in section 29.2.
E ko taka I te rera I te tuanga uru ruanga uru maiwa. Rua.
The original idea behind that was that everyone would be levied a flat fee whether they used the water or not.
Ko te manako anga e kia tutaki tātou I te tutaki anga muni kātotoa, kirunga I te kātotoa.
But now the government has said that every domestic consumer will have a free allocation.
Nara, ko tutua mai tā tātou kaumani e, kia oronga ia te tai tuanga, oronga ua ia kare tātou e tutaki ki te au ngutu are tātaki tai.
Obviously, we can't charge a flat fee because people will think they have been misled.
Ka karanga tātou i reira kare e tau e kia tutaki tātou i te no te mea kua arataki e tātou ki irina kia kare tātou e tutaki tō tātou vai.
The reason to require people to be connected has gone, and the public do not like it.
Ko te manako i reira kia tōpiri e rai tātou ki runga i te paipawai, ko ere te reira, kare uki te mātango tanga te arikia nei te reira.
As so often happens in law, as one person said last night, small changes have big effects.
Me tā te tangata i tutua i na poe, no atu te mengi tika o te akatuki anga e aka anga rā tāna ka rawe.
So must becomes may. Must becomes may. Must means you have to, and may means you can decide.
E rua o ki tū, pene ka inanga roko e me kore ka maru i koe ki tau te tōpiri i kiru.
That means that section 29.5 and section 29.7 go.
Tere te aiteanga, ko te irawa ruanga urumai wa rima e te ruanga urumai wa itu kua tipu i e te rera.
Then, am I still here? Next one. Yeah, regular.
25.
There has been, as the Chair indicated, concern about the breadth of section 66C in particular.
Ko tutua ia te tutua o te irawa hononga urumau no C.
It is important for the Tatou Vai to be able to make rules to ensure that the water in the network is not harmed.
Kai naro ia ki oronga ia te tika anga ki tō tātou wai, ki anga i te tai au ture, norunga tika ai i te akono anga i te vai e auraka te rira ki a tākino ia.
But that was not clear in the section.
Nā rā kāre te rira i māramarama metaki i roto i te irawa nei.
And people quite rightly said I had made it too broad and it might stop people with their private collection of water.
E kua arika katoa rira ki tā teta i au tangata i tutua mai e aka e maataroa te tutua anga o te ture nei.
Essentially the aim is to allow people to have their own water systems separate from the network without interference from Tatou Vai.
Ko te uki rera te mānaka nokoanga o te iti tangata e ki raukarai e rātou i te anga i tō rātou o rai vai e kāre roa e tāmanamanta anga a tō tātou vai ki runga i rātou.
But we still need rules to make sure that what people do privately does not interfere with the network.
Kai nā rai tātou i rera ko tā tātou aka pōanga ki aka mitaki i tō tātou vai no tātou o rai, nā tātou o rai auruka ki tāmanamanta ia.
The next issue is tariffs.
Ko te tai mana ko tā tātou ka ururi tēnei, ko te tūtaki anga muni.
Now, I want to begin by explaining that tariffs is a long-term project.
Kai nā rau te akite ki tātou e, ko te tāmanawanga nōrunga i te tūtaki anga
Can
muni.
you guys stop for a sec? Kia ora, ko Andy Kirkwood Topa Ingoa. Go back to the previous slide, please, Mr. Mason.
Excuse me, Mr. Kirkwood.
Mr. Brown.
If you would like to talk, please, can you address the chair, and we will allocate a time for you to
I
talk.
will do, Mr. Brown. I did not want to miss up this slide. Delete section 66C and D. D is the free allocation, Mr. Brown.
No, I can answer that easily. Andy, I apologise. I just saw that D, and I don't know why it's there, and it shouldn't be there. So you're right. It's only sections. It's section 66 A, B, and C, and D is an error. So my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Yeah. All right, well, I can't accuse the public of not reading the slides. Okay, now we're... the issue of tariffs, I thought Andy was going to let me off the hook. But tariffs are... it's going to be at least a couple of years, 2 years, before we can introduce tariffs.
Ko te tutua no te tutaki anga I te vai, e a ka pō anga tuatau te tai ka nono e no te rawe I te reira, ka pōrai me te tai rua mataiti.
Tariffs are going to be a complex exercise.
Anga maata no te akatina mō anga I te tutaki anga.
And it will require Tatou Vai to install water meters first.
Te mea te tumu, kai nauru ia tō Tatou Vai kia tamo mō I te tai o mita no te tare anga vai, namo.
At this stage, we don't even know how much water is being consumed.
E te ati anga te kai, kari rauka te aka papu anga I mātou, e ate mata anga o te muni, tātātou e aka te vai, tātātou e aka pōni.
And before we deal with consumers wasting water,
E moa ke tātou ka karanga I o te tai o tangata te kaimamo nei te vai.
the public will expect us to stop leaking from the pipes.
Kānono ia te kainaro koto I mātou I tō Tatou Vai kia tapu I te o vai e kaimamo ia nei.
We estimate a loss from the pipes of about 40% of the water.
Kainaro ki te katoa tātou me te tai anga urupetene o te vai e pōua nei te tae nene wau.
So it makes sense to fix that first.
So kainaro ia tō Tatou Vai kia aka metaki I te rira nā mua.
The bill, therefore, simply establishes the principle that TTV can charge tariffs.
Ko inaro I rera ki aka tina mō ia te ture e rera rau kai te tika anga I tō Tatou Vai I te kaue mai I te tai tutaki anga.
Also, before any tariffs, go to the next one. But before any tariffs are introduced,
E moa ki te tai pati anga me kore te tai akaue anga ki tutaki e te muni, ki tutaki e te vai.
law will be passed to bring Tatou Vai under the Competition and Regulatory Authority,
Anono ia tō Tatou Vai ki aka tina mō ia te rera kopapa ki a topa rātou I raroa ke I te aka tere anga a te tai ture te anga I ake nei I ngā marama ake nei koe auki norunga I te aka rere anga o te tai o pitiniti.
That authority is established and it is currently has Telecom under its wing.
Te kua aka tina mō ia te rera kopapa te akarakara nei rātou I rera I te
And
Telecom.
I should say telecommunications, but of course we've only got telecom at present.
Te akara nei rera, te kopapa nei rera I te tutaki anga e tau I te taronga o te kawekarere.
Te Ponga will be next. Te Ponga will be next.
Ko te aruma I te rera, ko te aponga uira,
And then Tatou Vai.
aru atu I rera tō Tatou Vai.
Although Tatou Vai cannot make a profit,
No atu ki e kare tō Tatou Vai, e anu ia kia kimi pōpinga rātou ki mata.
and this is on the principle that there is not ownership in water,
Ko akatina mō ia te mana ko nei ki runga I te tuma mana koe, kare e tangata e koe I te pū o te vai,
it is a gift from God,
e apingaro a te me ko mai te atua.
and the charge should only be for conveying the water and not the water itself.
Ko te tutaki anga muni I reira, kare norunga I te vai, nara norunga I te o apinga e taanga anga I nei kia ere te vai naroto.
But that does not mean we might waste money.
Karugi tiri manoka ka tatua o ka tatua kai mo te mun.
And that is why it's important there be a regulator looking at our expenditure
No re rai ka inaru ia te tai kopapa ki akarakara I roto I te akapauanga
before any tariff is introduced.
I moa ke ka apaina ia mai e te tai hau akau anga ki tuta ki tātou.
Greg Longman, Tatou Vai, Chief Executive. In clause 27, it indicates that the authority Tatou Vai may restrict flow to certain consumers.
I raro I te tuanga runga uruma itu, o toto te rera norunga I te vai tuanga o te oronga anga vai.
I think this is best demonstrated if you can imagine a length of pipe
Katia te aka marama anga norunga I te ia, me te mea e paipa vai roroa tāau.
and if a customer was to extract an unfair quantity of water halfway along the pipeline,
Me te mea o te tai tangata, I roto pū I te paipa vai, e ka aka tae maata ai I tāna vai nono ua, right?
this may lead to a consequence, excuse me,
Eo akairo te tai, me kore eo anganga te tai te kātupu mai muria ki tere.
that consumers beyond that point may experience a lower pressure in their water or a reduced flow.
Me te roto pū koe I te ia paipa vai roroa, maata tāau vai ka kiriti ki wao, ko te au paipai rerei muria ke I te rera paipa vai, ka iti mai e ka maria tō rātou vai.
Restricting flow will still allow a flow of water into those dwellings, though.
Me areirei I rera te tere anga, ka maria rai te vai I te ere anga naruto I te paipa.
Next slide, please. And as a consequence, it is considered to add to 27.1
E me te re rara ko kapiti mai rera ki te akara tātou I te tuanga rongo mai tu tai.
in addition to the clause that the authority may not limit the supply of water to the amount which is less
Te karanga nei e ko te kopapa aka aere, kare e rauko ui rātou I te akaiti mai I te oronga anga vai ki te maata,
which is less than the amount prescribed by regulation.
auroka ki iti mai I te numero ti taka ia I raroa ke I te tureiti.
Yeah, okay.
Our next slide there is offences and civil liability.
Ko te tuanga tātātou ka akarei tia nei, ko te au akapaanga, e te au tāpakaanga.
Now, these particular clauses are designed for criminal activities and actions.
Ko te iau I rawature nei, te tuatua nei, norunga I te tai au anga kriminara,
These will only ever be determined by a judge, not by Tatou Vai.
ko te ia kimi anga nei, ka ere te rera ki mua I te akawanga, nāna te rera e kimi, ka re nā te kopapa aka tere o tō Tatou Vai.
Now, we've had some concerns about the severity of some of the fines and the figures.
E maata te o tangata ia kāri mai tō rātou mareka kore I te teimaa o te hutunga tutaki moni.
But the government will review the scale of those penalties.
Nara ka ere te kaumani ka akarakara ako o norunga I te teia o te akautunga anga tutaki moni.
The key thing to remember about this particular clause, this is put in there as a deterrent to discourage people that have a criminal intent or to harm the water system.
Ko te mea pōpinga, ka ina aru e tātou ki kite, ko te tumu i a ka tina mau i a e tia irawa ture, e tapu e arei i te tai o ang kriminara no te takikino anga i te turanga metaki o te vai.
This is not for our everyday folk out there who go about their daily business and their daily lives.
Kare te a ka apaanga e no tātou no te kātou toa.
Water is essential to life, as we all know.
Ko te vai e mea pōpinga mātaroa terera ki roto i tō tātou rang.
Criminal acts that may impact on the supply and safety of water
Ko te angang kriminara, ka ere te rera norunga i te turanga o te oronga anga o te vai, e te turanga metaki e ke tau te unu anga i o te rera o vai,
may result in putting the men and women and children of Rarotonga in danger. That's why this clause is there, and that's why it is quite harsh.
me tākino i rā te ora anga o tō tātou i te tangata tāne vai ne e te au tamariki no te tai apinga kino te tuku i o ki roto i te vai ko te tūterera o te kriminara.
One speaker last night expressed concern that large companies that go seabed mining face penalties which are the same or less than those of private individuals under this Act.
Ko tutua mai te tai tangata i na pō, ko te akapaanga norunga i te tai o pitiniti mamaata, pera katoa ki te tai tangata tātiki tai, hoi te tara aititi o tō rāua hutunga muni katutak.
I did not have that Act with me last night. I do have it tonight.
Ka re iaku te rera ture i te hui i maanga te hui anga ki aku nā rā te iaku i te taime.
Under the Seabed Minerals Act, even under regulations,
I raro ki i te ture o te au toka, pōpinga me raro mai te mona e pera katoa te au ture iti,
certain offences can carry a fine of up to $1 million.
ko te tai o kautunga anga muni, mātātu me te tai milioni tara.
And in addition, 2 years imprisonment.
Ka piti katoa atu i te rera, e rua mata iti ki roto i te ara auri.
And in addition, a loss of licence,
E tārua katoa atu i te rera, ka kiriti ke ia tōna raitin.
which for most companies would probably lose them hundreds of millions of dollars.
E ka karanga auri re, me te mea ka kiriti e tō rātu raitin i koti au pitiniti kim popinga e aka po anga tā rātu ka ruti.
The second point I wish to make is that fines and penalties are set for the worst possible situation.
Ai nā rako te aki te ki tātou e ko te utunga tutaki moni, kua te akara e nei te rera norunga i te au kino mātatikai.
The deliberate destruction of all the pipes on the intakes in Rarotonga would probably incur a severe penalty.
Koi oki, me te mea ako koro te tai tangata e kia takino i te au paipa vai, me kore te au kakapu vai o tātou o Rarotonga nei, kai nāru i rai kia paina e te tai utunga teia anore.
The deliberate damaging of a water meter because somebody is angry they have to pay for their water
Me te tai tū, moto o riri i te mea ka tutaki koe i te vai, wawa i koe i te au mita no te tare anga i te akapo anga vai.
would probably result in that person getting diversion or or discharged without conviction or convicted and discharged.
Hakarang koe rere, e kamama mai pa ai rera te hutunga anga no te rera tangata, kare pa ai e a kautunga teia ia, me kore ka kapa ia ai kare rau ki e a kautunga ia.
So I emphasise fines are set not for the average or the ordinary, but for the worst possible situation.
E ko te ia ka tina mo anga tutaki moni mata, te akara ia nei te rera norunga i te au tangata e kino pakari tā rātou kārawe, ia ano te au mea rikiriki o.
Nonetheless, the Solicitor General has kindly agreed to review those offence penalties
Rātura te rera, kua manakora ai te Solicitor General, e kia ere ko ai e kia akara ko naruto i te ia utunga muni.
to make sure they're not unfair compared to other legislation.
E rawenga e kia tau te tuko anga utunga tutaki moni e kia ka aiti I atu ki te ta I au ture aka apa ang kia atu.
Of this kind.
Me te te tu.
Now, I think you can read the penalty provisions yourselves. They're fairly straightforward. They're listed there on the slide in the next one.
Ina kia we te ki te maira koto I te akariri anga I runga I te
They relate to
papaakata.
the fraudulent aspect really relates to tampering with meters.
Te anga fraudulent, me kore anga pikika, ko tōna ai te anga, ko te harapaki anga koe I te au mita, te tā momo I no te tāre anga I tā wakapo anga mai.
Go to resale. The one other matter that I raised because has been raised by people is there's a prohibition on the resale of water without the consent of Te Tatou Vai.
E roto katoa e te tuanga rimanga o maono, no runga I te oko anga I te vai, tika anga to te Tatou Vai I te paruru I te rere, me te kare I tika anga.
That is intended to cover a case as we've had in New Zealand.
Kua katina mo I te rere ki te tai au manamanta te tupuki nuti reni,
Where two Chinese companies have been producing water
e rua ngā company tinto
from the
e
aquifer,
te
from underground,
oko I te vai, roko mai te vai no raro mai te enu,
and the farmers and residents have complained that they have no water pressure anymore.
e ko tamanamanta te waronga tanu o te rera tuanga e ko pouto rātou vai no tā rātou angang.
It is not aimed to stop a hotel from charging you for water.
Kare te rera e tāpu I te tau atu pitinisa o te alia e te maro mai ke tutaki ia.
Although I don't think they should anyway.
E toko muna kare I te mea tau e kia maro rātou ki tutaki ia.
The governance provisions I won't deal with because we've spoken for long enough, but they are the standard provisions that are in the Ports Authority Act, the Airport Authority Act, the Bank of Cook Islands Act and the Te Aponga Act. So we just have those standard provisions for statutory corporations that are owned by the Cook Islands Government Property Corporation and are managed by the Investment Corporation. Thank you for your patience.
Ko te au ira vai reira I roto I te ture tāmana kone ko ai te takatoa ia me te tai o kopapa ere o te government.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I now open the floor.
Chairman, let's get rid of this palaver. We're here to discuss our water. None of this fucking crap that you are talking about. Let's talk about the water. Okay? And the water is, hey, come on. We're not here to listen to you all up here. Hey, Chairman, let's talk about the water. We're wasting our time talking about all other stuff, which is...
Excuse me, please.
The issue.
We have people here.
Water corporations, they're going to charge us for water. They're going to, water that we get off our roof that goes in our water tank, they're going to charge us for that. That's the issue here today. That's the issue.
I'd like to open up for...
You stand up. No, hey, come on.
Sorry, Manavaro. We'll give the floor to you.
I have a right to talk, and my right is, I want to talk about the water, not when you're drunk.
Can we have those who would like to talk, please, a reminder, please state your name so we have the record. We know who's talking at the time. And please raise your hand and make your way to the nearest microphone. Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora tātou kātou tō i te aro mātou te tō. Philip Nicholas tō kuingo. Maunei te tonga mana moro o matai pututara. I te awana anui, nā te tangia ka Takitumu. E rima o rangatira. I raro toko ka tere tere. E rima rangatira. O te katoanga o Ngāti Manawaro. I roto i awana anui, mō kainu wariki. Aro takake i a kainu wariki. Ki te pōro tātou, ti Aotearoa. E iwa rangatira i raro tono ka tere tere. E ka kāpiti ana mō. Te awa ka tere tere anga i roto i awana anui. Tō mau tūranga i roto i awana anui. Ai te. Pare tūtara. Pare ari. Ai te tō mau tūranga. Nō te mea, me te kare ego nei. Atu katoa e mi tutu au. Tiroto te ia mana kono o e kainu tirunga i ako. Tā maoanga e rawe nei i roto i awana. Mai runga i te take mau. E roro atu ki tei. Karangoe, ai te tere tamao anganga ki te committee, tā koto e tutua nei, ai pōkere kere mai, nō te mea.
Get the other microphone.
Thank you, Eternal. May take a mat, God bless. So, the grand new Tamao. Nō reira te tutua nei tātou runga i te Catchment Committee. O te karanga neo, o ti takere ana tā mātou, mai pōkere kere mai. Te mao te aronga mana, i roto i awana, te mana tiaki, te mana paru, te opi kātou tō. E te waina i te ara. I roto puia mao, i rina ki au e, ki anga kāpiti tātou. There has to be a mutual respect and mutual trust i roto puia tātou. Karuke putu wau ko, te ara nei te oro. Wau e atu inu au, i te ngā e kāpu anga wai, i runga e kāpiru, 9M, e turanga are, 9N. Nō reira, i te ai nei, tūrau i tātou kātou tō, areo e uianga tā karuku au ho, pat i roto i te whakatākitumu, e ono pūpai. 70%, te mātanga te wai, ti roto i te waka. Nō reira te tūne i te pō, te akitine o e, o te waka tangata. E riro nei rātou, e mau nei, te wai no te isi tangata. Te isi tanga kātou tō. So, karuku wā kone, pata kapati au ki tōku wā tū, e te tū o te karangatao e te lawyer, ki rea toko wā tūtua no runga i tāku tō. Ki ere mai ki e oke tuta i mana konoko ki ere tātou ki mō, ki hui ki te anga. So, Tai Nicholas, patina i a koe. Can you come over, please? Mai te ki mata, ako ni komo kakai.
Kia ora, Tai Nicholas, landowner and lawyer for certain landowners in the intakes. I think it'll be good tonight to give context of the issues facing landowners in the current court proceedings that are before the court. In 2014, the Minister of Infrastructure made a declaration that he would like to enter the intakes in Rarotonga and start to develop them and reconstruct them and replace the pipes. The landowners then agreed to this without compensation in order that the construction can be built so we can have clean water for our people. In 2016, the landowners found out that the government was going to charge water. So we started court proceedings with the landowners and the government, and we'd like to commend the government for providing legal advice to the lawyers and the opportunity for us to have an avenue in the court on 3 issues. The first issue relates to access. As Mr. Mason said, this land belongs to us, and government have a right of use to it. And you, the landowners, have agreed that we could let the government come onto the land, develop it, and let free water to our people. The second part is the bill, which we're going to talk about tonight. And the third part of these proceedings is a valley-wide management agreement under the Environment Act so that the landowners can control all the valley and have a say in how the valley is managed. Unfortunately, the landowners that I represent in Tautauetu, Taipara, Takawaine, Tupapa, Matavera, Avana, and Turangi feel that their voice is not being heard properly and that a better dialogue and a relationship is required between the landowners and government. For example, there was an undertaking by the government that the landowners would be consulted first over this bill. We had one consultation last year, we provided some recommendations, but all our recommendations were rejected by the government. In that response, the chairman of the Select Committee has agreed that on the 24th of August, landowners can present their submissions to the government and have an opportunity then to have our say. And I think the chairman should be commended for that. The issues, for example, that the landowners have in respect of the bill include the following: recognition of custom and the role of Arangomana, both in the valleys and in the intakes. We respectfully submit that landowners should have a representation on the board, as well as other interest groups like businesses and agriculture. Our concept of free water is free water, and not free water that is then indirectly paid by the taxpayer. The concept of catchment committees should reflect the custom in those respective valleys. The issue of potable water and chemicals should also be addressed in this bill. And we will summarise these submissions to the government when we have an opportunity. Although not related, landowners I represent think that 2 things should happen. Negotiations should start immediately with the landowners to talk about the access, to talk about compensation and the rights, to formalise the rights that government should have access to the land. Secondly, and though not related tonight, but really important issue for the public, is when can consultation start in respect of the chemical use and the use of chlorination, which will be another public interest matter for all the people of Rarotonga. Landowners believe that they don't want it seen to be difficult that they are guardians for our future generations and ensure that the chemicals or the way we use our valleys protects our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tai. I now see Kaka Ama.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora ana ki ngā kai mo, o tūkaka ama tuku ingo, noro tō mai o te tuanga kakapuai o tūrangi, e para katoa I Matawera. Te me mua, tōku mana ko kāre tangata I tūmea ki runga I te tūtua I te tūtua, I taka mita ki te komani, no te rawi I te ianga.
I think no one have stood up to thank the government for what they have done.
Thank the government for taking time to listen to the landowners, to listen to the voice of the people, and thank them for the hard work they are doing, continued hard work, with mistakes to give us clean drinking water. Aragui. Tuto pao. Kono mo kumai ka ari ki te tuto pao tuto mor. Te akara neo ku akamata takeri te akatuke anga e ku akamata takeri to tatu komani te akarongo I te reo te akarongo no atu rao te ngā upa anga I te pāke nei.
I notice there's already some amendment changes to the bill,
which is good and positive.
Ka e pene ka rawe.
Shows that we are moving forward, we are getting things done. For one, we've got government on one knee so far, and they've got their ear to the ground. Secondly, let tonight's meeting be an opportunity for us in Takitumu to be remembered as the ones who came to a solution I te tia mana ta tatu ki te nei no te wai. Tia koe. E turu ia tuanga tā koe akaratu neo mi te akamata mea ngō tia mana ta.
There are 3 points that I want to raise.
Kari te mana ta mata.
It's not a big problem.
Te me mua.
Firstly,
te tutaki anga o te wai.
The paying of water.
Te rua. Te
Secondly,
rakau anga o te wai.
The chlorination of water.
Te toru. Te tika anga o te atu enu.
The landowner's rights.
Nā, me akarau ngā upa anga I te pāke nei.
When I think of the 3 meetings,
ko tapa mai te o mana ko mitaki I te akatano tanu I te iawe.
good thoughts and ideas came out to make a correction.
Reka katoa te iti tangata, taku irina ki au.
I believe that the people are happy
I te mea ku akarongo mai ko toi tō rātou reo.
because you have listened to them.
Ko irina ki au karati te tōtou riri ako. Karati te tōtou tō umai.
I believe this is not the time for us to get angry and to point fingers.
E tōtou te ki anga ang kapiti tātou ki te kauman.
It is a time for us to work together with government and the landowners.
Ki rau ko mai te tai ture. Tia ture tapapa nā tātou e ture mitaki.
So this bill can become law to guide us.
O reka katoa o te akapāpū meanga. Tō tātou kauman.
I am also
Ia kumiti.
happy that our government have confirmed through this committee.
I te mea uke te karanga mai koe, kua rekoti e te epeong. Kia maarai e rea, nā kui tutua te tutua.
Because like what you have said, this will be recorded in remembrance of what I've said.
E ka free ua te wai. Kare te wai e tawe rā ko ia.
That the water will be free, will not be chlorinated.
E ka akarongo ia, akarongo ia te tikaanga o te atu inua.
And the government will recognize the rights of the landowners.
Reka katoa I te kiteanga I te au aronga tātā ture, o ure tui tō tātou ngutu are.
Happy to see the new legislators in this house.
No te mea, kare tātou I nōro tia ture, ke riro mai a tata I rā, I pu ere rea no tātou.
Because we don't want this law to become a stumbling block or a trap for us.
Tēnā te kita nei tātou i New Zealand, surunga o te wai.
We've
Rā te
seen
Māori e
that
karo
in
mai rei
New
tō rātou wai.
Zealand. The Maori people are arguing about their water.
Kare tātou i noro ki a, aru tātou i te rāmatara.
We don't want to follow that pathway.
I tāpenga i tāku tūtua poto i tie pō.
And finally,
Te tangitangi nei te reo imene ruti e tātou e Takitumu.
there is a song that's ringing in Takitumu.
Nunu e nana. Tukuna ia mai nā te vai. Ea, te rā te reo imene. Kauri koe tera.
Nunu and Nana.
Natalie and Nathan. Tō tātou imene i te pō e te mineta. Te karanga nei, te ara rangatira. Tukuna ia mai nā te vai o Tōtikariki. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Justine and then Tere after her. Thank you.
Kia ora ana. Ko Justine Matatoa Flanagan toko ingoa. No nā tangia mai au, no roto mai au I te ngati te aia e tangi au. Now, excuse me, I do not speak Aoreo, and I apologize for that. My children speak better Māori than I do. I chose to raise them here so that they could have the gift of this language and be brought up here, which I was not privileged to do. My mind is papa'a. That is why I can speak to parliamentary processes and I can talk to people like Brian Mason. But my heart and my gut is Māori. And that is why I can speak on behalf of my family and my tribe. Now, the young man that spoke earlier, he was angry and he was drunk. I am not drunk, but I am just as angry. Now, the reason why I'm angry is because a bill, I'm sorry, I'm tiptoeing. It's really tiring. The way that Parliament works is that a law, oh, thank you, Auntie.
You take that.
Woo. This is the problem, Mike. Don't stand here. Okay. When a bill gets passed and made into law, it goes through stages, and each stage is important. It plays a role. The first stage is that it get introduced into our Parliament. That is our house. It is read. The title is read. The second reading is to debate the principles and merits of a bill. That's the big ideas, the why this bill exists. That did not happen. This, of all bills, should have had a second reading. I sent an email out on behalf of Te Waiora Māori to request that our MPs debate the higher principles of this bill. I sent it to all Rarotonga and Atataki MPs because it directs them effectively. That did not happen. The reason why that is a mistake is because when it comes to this process that we're currently going through, which is Select Committee, we are all working within the framework of this bill. It is just the details and the clauses. Now, my copy of this bill looks like I slaughtered a pig. It is covered in red ink with all the corrections that need to be made. Because as Brian Mason mentioned, you change one word, you have to change many different clauses and headings. It has huge repercussions. We are all working within this framework. That is wrong. Our MP should have stood up and said, this is what we want with our water, this is appropriate for our culture and our islands. And each one is different, each catchment is different. And oh, that's a bit difficult for the law, but too bad. This project is supposed to last us 100 years. It is important to get it right. If we discuss the principles, then we will be able to talk about things like how our people respond to penalties. We don't want to be penalised, we want to be supported and helped. And yeah, sure, some of us are a little bit irresponsible with our water, but we are not criminals. We would have discussed land rights openly, not behind closed doors. I have asked the landowners to talk to the public about what is going on, and they're a little bit concerned that it might affect their chances of getting their say in court, because once again, they're embedded in another papa'a system. That's not right either. There are many parts of this bill which aren't right. And if we dealt with the principles, we wouldn't even be discussing these finer little points about the words may and the words must. Now, I still have many issues in this bill, which is at the final level, but I won't tie up your time because I can write a submission and Brian Mace can read it as a lawyer. But I'm standing here and I'm asking our MPs to do a better job. We deserve better, and some of the people have approached me and said, I feel really guilty that I haven't been keeping an eye on things and I don't know what's going on. Don't feel guilty. Those of us who have jobs and can pay taxes, pay these people up the front to do that for us. You shouldn't have to. You should be able to go about your lives and plant your taro and raise your children and play on the beaches because you pay taxes so these people up the front can look after our interests. Now, when it comes to election day, I want you to remember, well, first of all, I want this bill to be scrapped right now and rewritten. I want consultations around the islands, and if I don't get my way and the people don't get their way, and this goes through to the third reading, which basically is a, yep, cool, we agree, or no, we think it sucks. I want you to remember every single MP. And I want you to remember where they said yes or no.
Thank you. Thank you, Justine. Can I remind the people, please? This microphone is quite loud. We can hear you when you're speaking quietly or when you're speaking loud. Please. I have Tere on this side to speak, and following we have Sunny on that side. Thank you.
Kia ora ana tātou katoa. Ko tere kā tō kuingoa. Atu inua o I runga I te inua turanga are 9N I Awhana, I Turangi, I Tatou Vai, Mandureva 119. Te tū mai nei au I te hui te taia hui anga ki te Select Committee te Apo.
I rise to ask some questions to the Select Committee tonight.
I'll speak in English now. As you have heard previous speakers speak about before me, the Select Committee as well as TTV Chair Mr. Mason have reiterated how important landowners are in this bill and that the landowners still own the lands that the infrastructure is built on. And I just want to get confirmation from Mr. Mason that that is the position.
The water system can't work without the landowners.
And
Treading on it. Well, I'm not sure.
the land upon which the infrastructure of the intakes have been built still legally belong to the landowners? That's my question.
Oh, yes, they do. Absolutely.
And as has been heard in the media and tonight, initial agreements between the Crown and the landowners would be that land would be accessed by the Crown to build the infrastructure to provide free water to our people. Can you confirm that that was the position?
No, I can't, because I've only become involved recently and I have not been involved with Tatou Vai. I'm only involved with Tatou Vai.
Okay. Maybe Mr. Chairman can respond to that. That the position of the landowners has always been that you can use our lands but provide free water to our people.
No doubt. Thank you very much for the question, Tere. And just to remind again people, this land belongs to landowners, and it was through a period of consultations with landowners that the government that the government got consent to go onto the land, firstly to survey, and then come back to the landowners to get consent for the work to commence. So we are only there with a right to use by the consent of the landowners. Now the water, the free allocation of water for households is what we're talking about here. That is the free water that we're providing. But it sounds like we want to provide now the water free for everybody. So commercial, everybody will be having free water. Now that's what's been asked for here. The reality is, with the very, very poor water system we have now, in our budget we spend $800,000 a year for the poor water system we have.
I think you've more than answered my question.
Okay.
Yes, so
Thank you.
that's just extra. Mr. Mason, you've indicated that you drafted this bill. You had a lot of input into the drafting of this bill.
The errors and omissions in it are mine.
Can you honestly say, Mr. Mason, that once this bill becomes law, that the landowners will still be able to say what happens on their lands and what items will be allowed onto their lands?
This bill deals with catchments.
No, I've asked you a different question.
No, this bill only deals with catchments, so to that extent, the answer is yes. This bill does not deal with the intakes where the buildings are. That's under the Rarotonga Water Ordinance and the Infrastructure Act. And it does not deal with the valleys generally, which at the moment are being dealt with by access agreements. But some people have said, and Mr. Nicholas made the point, that possibly there should be some legislation concerning them as well. But a lot more issues arise with the valley because it's not just preserving the streams, the taro patches, it's also the roads and other infrastructure. So it's broader than just Tatou Vai.
Yes, but my question is, when this bill is passed and becomes law, will landowners be able to stop Tatou Vai Authority bringing things onto our land, such as chemicals and other items that landowners do not consent to?
No, the bill doesn't deal with issues such as chemicals. It's completely neutral. It doesn't deal with polyaluminum chloride, it doesn't deal with chlorine. And one of the reasons it doesn't do that is because we need a bill to establish the water authority. We need this water authority whether we chlorinate or we don't chlorinate. We need this water authority whether we fluctuate or we don't fluctuate. We still need to manage water no matter what the final decision is on what we do with the water.
I note at section 8A of the bill that the responsibility or the function of the authority is to collect, treat and reticulate water. At present, is that correct? You can check your copy if you are still able to read it, or notes on it.
Yeah, that is correct.
Can I just ask my question?
Sure? Mm-hmm.
So at present, the water flowing through our system is not treated. So my question is, how will TTVA treat the water, as will be their responsibility at Section 8?
That will depend on the Public Health Act. The Public Health Act will set the standard for the water we have to produce.
And
the water and the treatment of the water will be contingent on what our requirements are. So the issue of the treatment of water lies in the Public Health Act, and nothing has been passed at that stage. But that's where people should direct their attention.
Yes, can I just stop you? Because you have put in this act that potable, which we know to be water that's been treated, has a definition that is already existing under Section 3(1) of the Public Health Act 2004. Can you tell us, because it's not written in here what the definition is of such an important word, what is the definition under Section 3 of the Public Health Act?
Okay. The potable water under the Public Health Act is a standard, is water that you can drink, and that water standard is only reached at the moment if you use ultraviolet light, or you use chlorine, or you use some other means of disinfection. Potable water is mentioned in the bill solely for the purpose of allowing TTV to inform people, particularly at public water stations, that they should boil their water if it's below a particular standard. Nothing in the bill says the water has to be that standard. All it says is that if it falls below that standard, then we can put up a boil water notice, which is just saying to people, just be careful, don't drink it. So it doesn't deal with the issue of whether we have to disinfect or not, although, as you probably know, the government has asked TTV to undertake repairs and work on a number of water stations. So that probably won't be necessary because there's quite a number. How many? 10?
Mr. Mason,
10 water stations now that have ultraviolet light that produce potable water.
Yes, you've answered your own question. So when you refer back to the potable water definition under the Health Act, it includes chlorination. So within the responsibility of the Water Authority, the new Water Authority, it will be to treat water to that standard, will it not?
I don't have it in front of me, but I don't think that's right. Potable water doesn't have a definition of how you get to it. It's a definition of what it has to be. Now, we have potable water at the moment at most of the water stations, and they're not chlorinated. Ultraviolet light is used.
Okay. If I could just ask another point. On the Tuesday night meeting, you indicated, or it's been indicated in the newspaper, that the amount of money required to run TTVA will be about $4 million per year. We understand from the bill itself that the new authority will not inherit the debt that has been associated with the water project, and neither the interest that is associated with the water project. That will be paid and managed by the government and paid by the taxpayers. Am I correct in my understanding of that?
That needs to be dealt with in two bits. The first bit is that you are correct that the debt of Tatou Vai does not become part of the debt of Tatou Vai, and that's specifically provided for in this bill. The second bit is from the newspaper. Now, the newspaper has recently said that the minister made some derogatory comments about landowners, which he never did, and an apology was put in the paper at the bottom of the third page subsequently. I wrote a letter to the paper in which the quote that I made was picked up and on 2 pages earlier was attributed to the minister. So first of all, I do not believe anything I read in the Cook Islands News. It is so generally appallingly written. The second thing is, anyone who says that it's going to be 4 million is entirely speculative. It's not possible to determine what the future costs of Tatou Vai will be until we know what the cost of polyaluminum chloride will be and how much we need it. And we will not know until a decision on whether to chlorinate the water or not is made. So it's entirely speculative.
So are you just confirming that you will be buying chemicals like polyaluminium chloride?
Well, my understanding is McDonald Dow has bought them already, but it can't use them because of issues that have arisen. But the chemicals that we buy will be contingent upon the decisions the government makes.
So my question earlier was that if this bill is passed, will McConnell be able to use the PACL that is sitting on our lands or on
No.
island?
It will have no effect on that issue, none whatsoever.
Okay, we've heard that.
Excuse me, Terry, if you have a lot, because there is a lot of people who want to ask
I know,
questions.
but there's
If you
some
can-
really important issues and
Yeah.
that need questions
If you
answered.
can get to your points, thank you.
I'm asking them, but I'm getting very long answers back. It actually should just be a yes or no. Okay?
Now, I will not answer questions yes or no. We are more complex than that, and the issues are more complex. I will answer the questions fully so that the audience fully understands.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mason. So in terms of the 4 million, that has been in the newspaper and it was mentioned on Tuesday meeting by yourself as being around that mark, and
No.
that's why I raised it.
No. People are trying to speculate as to future costs. We cannot determine them until the entire new network is fully operational. There is no point speculating on it, but it is at that point that people will probably start asking about the tariff.
Well, the reason, Mr. Mason, is because we are setting up an authority, a new authority, and we have no idea what the costs are going to be associated with this new authority. Why should we be changing from what we have now to something that we have no idea what it is going to cost?
Well,
you must have some idea.
I can tell you what its base operating cost is. The base operating cost is about 2.8 million a year, but I would emphasise that previously ICI did the management and that cost was absorbed in the overall works budget. I cannot tell you if that is substantially more or significantly less, but I can say that Rarotonga has reached the stage where it needs a separate water authority.
The big question here, so you've mentioned 2.8 million. Yep. Given that you will not have to repay any costs, expenses associated with the infrastructure, the loan that the public will be paying, can you give us a component of, you know, what the 2 million will make up? We're talking salaries. Is this all going to salaries to pay your authority?
Well, for example, the salaries are between 1.4 and 1.6.
Wow.
We
we are already paying enough.
But again, people need to understand that Rarotonga has a very complex water system. If you take a place like Auckland, it's got If you take a place like Auckland, it's got the Henua Ranges and it's got the Waitakere. In Rarotonga, you have 10 small intakes. You need people going up there almost daily, and you've got 10 intakes. There's a lot more people required than in other water systems. So I did not expect an argument over the employment of my Cook Island staff. And I don't think it's the sort of...
They're not all Cook Islanders.
Most of these people that are employed by us they're almost all, returning Cook Islanders, some of them very well qualified with an expertise in water we haven't had before, or from ICI where they worked on water.
Mr. Mason,
and I just don't think it's fair.
The meeting tonight is for the public, and I'm sorry, but you're just taking too long to answer your questions because you're taking up our time.
They're not relevant. The questions, with respect, are not relevant to the bill.
Yes, they are, because you are asking us to have consultation on this bill, which will set up a new authority, which will add extra cost of living burden to the people of this country. We will already be paying the loan that government has entered into as well, and we will be paying for this new authority. So it is very relevant as to why we need this new authority set up. Now, in terms of the setup of the catchment committees, given that I'm on 3 intake catchment committees, and I'm also the chair of the Tatou Vai Water Catchment Committee, when were meetings conducted where landowners agreed to be included in this bill at sections 11 to 25 as catchment committees? Have you had meetings with landowners to see if they have consented to being in this bill?
No, I've circulated this bill to landowner representatives months ago, and I have not, you are correct, I have not gone to every landowner, nor would I know how to, nor would I have the capacity to.
But that is your job.
Yeah, and that's why landowners were specifically given letters and so on, encouraged to come to this meeting. Now, I don't have a problem if people say we don't want catchment committees, but it
That's
just
not
seems...
the problem, Mr. Mason. The problem is that you have written us into a bill that we have not consented to. And you have given the impression that we are part of this. We are not.
This is the consultation. This is the first time the bill has been put out.
I think
so
these
this is part of
questions
it.
are very, very important because when the talk is coming from the front and talking about catchment committees was quite a big part of the presentation, I think it's important that everybody knows landowners have not been consulted on those catchment committees.
That's what this proposal is,
So
to see if you'd like
I
to
would like-
this idea or not.
I would
Can
like...
Can you just tell us if you agree to catchment committees or not?
Well, I put it to the committee and the select committee that you have already started deleting many sections, that you also delete sections 11 to 25. Because we, the landowners, as collectives, have not had meetings with you to say we are part of this. And I think it's important the public knows. So I'm asking that sections 1125 that relate to catchment committees be removed from the bill.
Thank you. We'll put that into the report.
So those are my questions, but I think it's really, really important to understand that, and I want a commitment from the committee tonight, the select committee, with all the amendments that are being made to the bill during this time of consultation. I am putting it to the committee that you have a responsibility to come back to the public with further consultations, like we've had this week on a new bill. We cannot have a cut and paste job and know whether you put some things in, took it out, but snuck it back in just before you put it in Parliament. So I'm asking the Select Committee to please come back to the public for further consultation with the final version after you've taken our views into account. Will the committee...
Thank you.
Will the committee commit to that? I'm asking, Mr.
We will
Chairman.
certainly be coming back to the public. I think you can be assured of that. There's a lot of public interest in this bill. What you're proposing is doing away with any landowner rights up there in this bill.
No, I'm not. I'm
you want
asking
to
for
delete
the
11 to
meetings.
25.
No, I'm asking for consultation with the landowners prior to this bill being completed. Meet with us before you put us in here. We want to know what are we doing in here? We need to have those meetings before we come back.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Sunny. We have Sunny first, and then this gentleman here, and then Tim Arnold at the back, and then we had Tupe, and then Florence. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou kātoto, kia ora ana koto e mua minita. Waika I mata e puna roto mai ngā tangi ia. I am a landowner on Taipara, Totoko Tukiuta, Avana and Turangi. Te tanu wā tātere. You did not give us the opportunity to have a say and to look through this proposed bill. And we're quite offended because No mātou te inua, te tanoanga, ko mātou te atu inua, should be one of the first group you meet before you come to the public. Nah. So we're quite offended. Kainaro, everyone here tonight to know this. When government first called a meeting to be held between government and the landowners, and they laid out their plan, and we were excited. We jumped up and down, yes, why not? Go ahead, government. Utilize our land. Put up the tanks, put up the structures. It's for the good of the people. Yes. And we were excited about that. And then we did say to government, you will not, we will not ask you for compensation. So go ahead. Under one condition, kare te ukanga, to tatou i tangata e tsutaki I te vai. Yeah. And the minister at the time confirmed, yes, we will not, our homes will not pay for water. I te era kua tini. Yeah. And we're quite very upset about that. Commercial use, of course, they should pay. I have 9 villas. I understand. I should pay. Ko tātou iti tangata rā, o I te karo. No e karo e roa rawat minita. Ai, hello. Te pati atu ne mātou te tai ui paanga, mātou atu inua, ki koto. Ki uri tātou ki ākarakara I tea. Te te ko mātou nā mua, no mātou te inua. And I am very happy, well, sort of, that section 66, A, B, and C have been deleted because I was prepared to attack that tonight. So, me te kamata, Your Honor.
Thank you, Sunny, and yes, again confirming the discussions with landowners need to take place.
Kia ora tātou katoa, te ia hae. O George Tamariki. Toko tupuna, rota mai kainuku tamoko. Toko tupuna wainen, rota mai manawaro. E atu enua mātou I te iawana. Te akamata angati e pingai te tutu e katusa ki te wai. Pōrua te agite nega te rarotonga o mana tā.
When the message came through that there will be tariff or rates to be imposed to pay water, the people on Rarotonga started to worry.
Ai, o mana tā. Tā rā, uki tātou e akamara. O te mea, te o pupe, te o paipai, paina e maina te wai, no uta mai.
When you think back, all the catchments that we get the water from to our communities, they have rusted, they're old. I thank the government for putting new pipes to replacing them because it's not an easy job.
It's not cheap.
And it's not cheap.
Tika, te ākarakara, te koe te government, te ākarakara ni mātou e takatu ai rawenei.
We are looking at what you are doing.
Te leianga te paipu mua.
When the first pipes were laid,
ua liki. Ua liki e ruki kiri ho.
They still leaked, and then there was another one replaced.
E muni te e pōnei.
There are a lot of money being spent. And the pipes were shared to our people. This is what I know. But let us remember that there is a lot of money spent.
O te anga ka maintain I rātou ea. Mea anga te mea, ka ina roi te tai aronga, mea repair di pinga mea kinoge te pupai pa.
For this type of work, you need workers to continue the maintenance and to replace some of the damaged pipes.
Yeah. Pero ka te pupai pa ya.
Even the catchment.
Te tamata ni te komuni ki ma to Tatou Vai.
The government is trying to provide us clean water.
Me to ma to tamariki anga mai. Kare te eru ani te Vai na to e kare po e ka.
Since childhood, we have always received water. Sometimes it's dirty water. Sometimes we would drink water from the stream at Avana. It's clean. I've been wondering, when you see Havana, it's a big valley. Why don't government build a dam there? You look up, why can't the government build a dam across the mountains to hold the water?
Hare roi malako pran ame koto pame te utang ka mama ata er ako yuta yana ibe uta ya takwen yuta ya turun.
Not only Havana, even Turangi.
Arko to ate ko tu op binga tiga te we me oro mai no uta yana to ma to mariki ha me ya maringi mai to oi oi ya ate ko tu patu te te temi uta yana mo to oi are rota to no te so te oi ya to no. Eh, mana kau Hai. Kau mau dia itu ya mana?
Tena tanga te pai a koe, pati koe
kai. No mato, hare koe yo. O mato te tu inu te terang. Orira. Tu ko mana ho re te, mana ko na ho, ara to komuni ko re, patu te ya ka ten yu te terang. Habu itu. Orira. Akar me koto to kotom. Eta ta ya ko mana ko neo. Eta ya ko mana ko to. Tamatu pai po ki me pai lorungo to ko kanga mi ro mo ye pai gut. Eta ka tamu ko te imita ki rung. Namatu re ki pai to matu wai me ro mo ye rung. Ta u hari we kana ni we ka ta ki ni no. Ta u akar me ko to akap e jiri nga. No te tamu ngai timit. Umna utano lagi itu tak kita tu aku tu emang lama tak itu tak kita tu itu tak kita tu dia pun tu mea tu maintenance ni dia pun. Baik, thank you muat mak.
Thank you Papa George. Tena de mana ko ke patu e te miuta ya mana. Thank you no to mana ko te tu tangata te ka tu ko Tim, please. Tim Arnold next.
Kia ora. I am Tim Arnold. I'm standing here tonight as representative of Pa Ariki. And it's hard to know where to start. Oh, with the manamanata e te po. Me te tāne te vaine. Oh, weto we, mauro kikia, mauro kitakita. Inara, te mea maata, e a te pirianga tau, e rotupu, te kawamani, te atu anua, e TTV. Tēnā te uianga. I'm about out of Māori now, so let me carry on. Because that's me. Not Pa Ariki. But look, let me share something else. Several days ago, I sent an email to Pa, and I said, Pa, this is going to be difficult. I need your authority to stand up in a meeting, and I've not had to do it last night or the night before. I need authority to stand up at a meeting and mildly chastise the government for how we've got to this position. Look, Manavaroa, you listen to him, and he is right. Tai Nicholas, you listen to him, he is right. Justine Flanagan, you listen to her, she is right. Tereka, no. But the point is this. All of us, as they say in New Zealand, we're in this together, and it is this relationship. And what I've been asked to do tonight is to stand up for Pa, to put her position, and those of you that have got rotten tomatoes, I'm here. But this is what I've been asked to say. That Pa stands, as she has done since the start of Tatou Vai, in broad support of this important project to improve Rarotonga's water supply to the people of this island, to all of you, and to our guests. Well, it's interesting that you talk about free, because I've been here for 40 years and I've been paying for water for 40 years. Everyone in this room has been paying for water for the last 40 years. And it's cocoa, it's not water. All right? So this is a system that is going to give us something that is perhaps not cocoa. It is going to be more expensive. And so the question is, do you all as taxpayers want to carry on paying no atu e te maato o te vai that you're using, or do you agree that the user should pay, that the waster should pay? That is the question for you. And many of you have said, hang on, we need more time for consultation. And we don't disagree with that. But that is the question. I have been asked, however, to make two important points. And if we thought they were important before I came here tonight, they are doubly important in terms of what I've heard. So firstly, as I've said in meetings in 2016 and 2017, talk is cheap. Those of you who say, well, this is fine, but do we trust the government? Well, I can tell you, Pa Ariki said, no, I don't trust the government. I trust this government, but maybe not the one in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. We want something in writing. And so when Tai Nicholas said, we need to get on with those deeds, they were called excess deeds, they're now called enduring deeds, the Crown promised in September 2018 to all the landowners and to the court in writing that it would commit to those deeds. And if you want to blame anyone for those deeds not having got any further, well, where are those rotten tomatoes? Because I'm standing here. Because I assume the responsibility, because Pa said, this is important, let's do it. But as time moves on and ideas change, we're watching it. It's a moving target. But one of the things that was in the draft deed was this. We said, as landowners, we want an independent authority that is accountable so we can see what's going on and we want to be talking to them. And I've heard Tere tonight say we don't need them. Tere, do you really want ICI for the next 50 years running the water the way they've run water the last 50 years? You need some people who are experts and can be identified, okay? Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, because in the draft deed, and it's still there today, and we still have control over it, I say we as landowners said, you can come. It's a good idea. You know, we heard that. It's a great idea. Let's do it. But it has to be affordable. Now, you've heard Brian Mason, and you might have thought, oh, look, he's not answering these questions directly. When Tere started to talk about potable water, nobody in this room, no one knows whether potable water is going to be affordable on this island right now. But that's not the fault of the minister or these people here. You heard it. 40% of the water is disappearing through the pipes. Doreen Boggs told us last night, as did Tapi Tayo, that probably another 20% of it is cocoa. And until we know what we've got, until we know what treatments we can afford, we don't know how much it's going to cost. And we don't know whether we can get clean water or potable water. And so it's not a case of people here being difficult. It's a case of, do we carry on with the cocoa we've had for the last 40 years, or do we put this new infrastructure in? And the landowners, all of you said, yeah, let's give that a go. Let's make sure it's affordable. But we come back to this business of relationships. And so I've been asked to say, as Justine said, well, what are the principles of the bill? Principles and merits weren't debated. Some of you may think they're self-apparent. But certainly for PAR, we noticed that there was a great deal of emphasis on landowners of the catchments, whereas at the meetings, we've had 2 sets of meetings already this week, it was acknowledged at the top table that the people who have made the sacrifice of letting those tanks and treatments and so on and so forth sit on their land, they've got skin in the game. And all those people downstream, their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, have made that sacrifice. They continue to make that sacrifice. And Brian Mason and Greg there, over the course of this week, have acknowledged they can't simply take all the water that they want, because there is a stream that runs on. There are people that are affected. And so what we noticed is that the bill is very operationally focused, but it doesn't deal with the valley as a whole. It doesn't deal with it holistically. Now that brings me to another matter that Tati Nicholas pointed up. And again, if you've got your tomatoes ready, I'm to blame. The promise was made by the government that it would commit the funds to set up a regime of joint management in each of the valleys. Each valley is different. Each valley has different needs. Each valley wants to go about it a different way. But that promise was made, and it was recorded by the court in September 2018. And so the people that are feeling angry, the people that are feeling insecure, the people that feel that this is the end of the road, no. This is the bill that we need to empower the experts to get on and operate what's been built to the best of their abilities to make sure that it is affordable. So our first request, and I won't read all this out because it's all lawyer talk in terms of the clauses, but we want the functions of the authority to recognise that all valley owners have skin in the game. Okay? The second issue, and again it's one of relationships, and it's about that provision about artesian and desalination and rainwater and what you can and can't do. And PAR, like many other people, was concerned to see that. But the message there would have to be, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The message is this: there is no one on this island that knows more about your water than the people that will make up this new body. It is the punanga of the legacy knowledge of the people like Adrian Teotahi, who learned his trade at the feet of Ken Brown, and Ken Brown off those that came before. Yeah. Okay. Right, I'm almost finished. Yeah, it is, well, it's about what PAR wants. So what we want is, it is a punanga and it's a koanga. And what we want is the bill changed, not so that these people are regulating us, but that they are providing advisory services to everybody for their water resources. And so we would like that change. And so I'll just finish by saying that in broad terms, PA agrees with Kainuku, with Manavaroa, with the sentiments that have been heard tonight, that this is a relationship. We need to get the appropriate parameters of the relationship. And yes, there can and should be better consultation with owners. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Tim.
Kia ora nei te minita. Kia ora na koto kato te muana. Pera katoa tātou e muri nei. Ka tāmata au ki aka poto toko mana. No te mea maata tangata ino ni tutua inara. Ka oki toak manga tutua poto o ki muri I rea koe koto I te kite e au ka turu e rea pira, e au ka pato e.
Give me a brief time to give you a history of why I'm supporting this bill.
I mua ki te self-government, e I te tātou self-government, te iwi mokotu o te apachiri angangatan. Me kare aine?
Before self-governing, our country is based on agriculture, planting, isn't it?
Kia kamata aku te turu te armai, kua kamata te tangang te tantan I te mengiti.
But after that, the amount of planters started to reduce.
No te mea rau ke green finger to, karero ko iaku I takaru ke tangangatan. Green finger, sorry.
And because I have a green finger, I can't stop planting.
I tratua to ora export or madug nutrient, to kumano te ngoruma au kumata I jijire tem.
And during that time, we were exporting produce to New Zealand. I was about 14 years old.
Nori ra mitire tem me utandono ngai te megitiara.
And ever since then, I've been planting up to today.
Tēnei, ka neke to kumano kirunga e te tapiri o te tatu border.
Now, I would like to talk about the closing of our border.
Uki te tatu I te teme, ko o tatu ki te manamanta.
You all know we're in a problem.
Rima mata I te pakini, ko roko e matu to koe te angamoe to matu mana koe ki export o te angangatan.
5 years ago, we, together with some planters, agreed to start producing to send to New Zealand.
Inongaro ta kiti ke koto e te em ne matu ki akamata September te export ki nuiteren.
But we are planning to start exporting sometimes in September of next year.
Inara ko tamatu export, it has to be organic.
But most of our export are organic.
E ko tamatu o te organic kare tano e ki use matu to tatu wai no to mai peni ke katavera ko ia. Te arene gurunga te pira.
I'm coming to the bill now. So this is the suggestion, and for all of you. We will not be using the water from the system.
It will never become organic.
Because we believe that it will be chlorinated, and it won't. So the product we will plant will never be organic. And this is what I discovered from the newspaper in the past. My water that I collect from the heavens into onto my roof and into my water tank. And when the water is flowing through the stream, I will collect my water from there.
Our
forefathers have created us a well, water from the ground. There's two. So, Honorable Minister and Select Committee members, when we get that water from the ground, please do not prohibit us from doing that. You will notice you notice that the tourism have gone down and there is an increase in agriculture.
But I
don't know how long will that be, but I want to assure you, in September of next year, we will start exporting. But if only can government support us in our growing of plants. I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say tonight, but that is all I need to say. I know that the Minister of Agriculture is within our midst. That's why I'm talking a lot about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tupi. Okay, I have Florence, then Imogen, then Diana. Thank you.
Kia ora to everyone before us this evening. Kia ora te whakatakitumu, te whakataunga, kia ora tātou katoa. I will be brief because usually I speak at happy occasions, marrying people. So, just a couple of things. Tōku ingoa ko Florence Syme Buchanan, born, raised, and living in Takitumu. It was said earlier from the table before us that the water system cannot work without the land and the landowners. So therefore my question is quite pertinent to everyone here and the landowners. The Tatou Vai bill has already been through 2 readings in Parliament. Could the panel before us please tell us why this bill even progressed to Parliament, given that there are legal proceedings underway that have been initiated by a number of landowners concerning their catchment and intake lands. And these are very significant landowners, some of whom are amongst us today, this evening. Several landowners have expressed deep unhappiness with the way they've been treated by the government. These landowners are the traditional landowners of significant lands that are critical, that are of utmost importance in the delivery of water to Rarotonga, not just to our waka, to all of Rarotonga. The legal proceedings have yet to be settled. And yet, the government is wanting to see this bill make its way, make its passage through Parliament and become law before the intake and catchment land issues are resolved. My question is why?
Brian Mason, Chair of Tatou Vai. This bill has no impact on the legal proceedings. The legal proceedings surround the intakes and the landowners there, and they've been filed under the Rarotonga Water Ordinance 1960, although they have expanded to cover issues wider than that. Landowners there are particularly concerned about the storage and use of any chemicals on their land, the preservation of their soil, and ensure there is no destruction of their streams. It doesn't affect the catchments, and this bill only deals with the catchments. It does. I should note that it does repeal 3 parts of the Rarotonga Water Ordinance. However, there's an act we have called the Acts Interpretation Act, which stops the government escaping. If you change an act or if you repeal an act, but a proceeding has already been filed, the repeal or the amendment will not impact the proceeding. And the reason that the Acts Interpretation Act provides that is to make sure that governments can't change the law to try and escape the consequences of the proceeding. So it will not affect landowners' rights in that proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Just the second issue I'd like to touch on. I think to a lot of people, I've been to the meetings in Te Autonga, I went to the meeting last night in Poekura, and listening to everyone here tonight, it is becoming quite clear that there are going to be a number of amendments and changes made to this bill. And I implore the honourable members of this select committee, please, listen to the concerns of the people. The concerns have been made loud and clear in the last 2 meetings and this final meeting here tonight. Please give everyone here tonight, including those watching the live feed, tō tātou iti tangata. The undertaking, the promise that the sections you have agreed that should be removed from the bill will be removed, and that all the concerns of our people, which have been recorded, will be duly considered and included in your final report that is presented to Parliament. The last thing I ask, Mr. Chairman, I also submit that in the redrafting of this bill, which will be necessary, that our people are given the opportunity and sufficient time to examine the redrafted version carefully. I ask that you please assure our people of this, Mr. Chairman, tonight. Mai take maata.
Thank you. Thank you, Florence, for that, and we acknowledge that. Imogen, please.
Kia ora ana, it's Imogen Ingram speaking. O te pāmata epo of Takitumu. And on the grandfather's side, we are landowners in the Avatu catchment called Pangoi 193. So I still think that landowners in the catchment area should also be considered, not just the landowners of the intakes. So we wait to hold those proper, meaningful consultations. I agree with what many other people said earlier, and will do my own written submission so as not to repeat. But I did have a comment about this bill in the definitions. I think it's very poorly done. In many instances, the definition says, look at another act. It is unreasonable to expect the average reader to hold 3 or 4 different acts in their hand when they're reading this, and I think it's lazy of the drafters. I think they should have copied it in. They should have copied in the relevant points from the other acts. It doesn't take that long. It is also, Sam, when you spoke about the history of the water ordinance, you did not mention the large report written in 1994-95 by the ADB Urban Infrastructure Project. Now, this was a very long investigation. Those scientists were here for 1 year, and they made very good recommendations on setting up a public utility authority, and that was going to have water and Te Aponga Wera in the same authority, and that would bring about savings with administrative staff, accounting, and that sort of thing. So I heard Brian call tonight for suggested solutions, and I hope you are serious, because it does mean that the experts in water will be different from the experts in electricity, but you know, there are common areas where staff savings can be made, like in receptionists and their admin and all that sort of thing. So that's one recommendation I would say, is to go back and look at the very good work done by those scientists in the Urban Infrastructure Report. If nobody has a copy of the report, I know that long-suffering Don Durrell has created PDF files because I refer people to him so frequently. The next one is about, I did the definitions. I'm very pleased to see that troublesome clause has been suggested for removal, where it's compulsory to become a customer, even if you are catching the water on your own land with appliances that you paid for yourself. I think there's a human rights issue there. Regarding the fines, I think it's normal that there should be a scale of fines published. So depending on the severity of the so-called offence, there should be a scale published in the Act. You can't just sort of say, well, up to 100,000, because I think it's a bit too discretionary. I think that's about it. As I say, I'll do written submissions, but those are the main things that still other people did not talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. Now Diana, and then after that it's Michelle.
Kia ora to everybody here tonight. Before I say anything, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are up there tonight, who have taken the time to come out for the last 3 nights to do this, to pretty much be interrogated by everyone, and for your patience in answering all the questions that we've put forward, so thank you. I also want to extend a thank you to Margaret, your secretary, for confirming a date for our growers consult. Thank you. I was approached by a number of people today to put this forward, so I'm putting this on behalf of Aitutaki, that's where I'm from, and on behalf of some people in our community here in Rarotonga. So I feel, and a lot of us feel, that we've lost our ocean. We've lost it to commercial fishing rights and seabed mining. And over the years, land rights have been eroded due to the loss of land by warrant, allowed by the very people that we vote to be our leaders and caretakers of those rights, justified by the greater good for all. Allowing the authority to create rules around the use of other water sources, aside from those in its catchment tanks, will essentially lead to our Indigenous people losing rights to their own water as a collective. Water is our final frontier. My question to you, Honourable Mark Brown, will you retract this bill you presented for reading in Parliament to create a new bill that serves the people of the Cook Islands as well as the framework required to govern the authority, to be rewritten through the lens of Cook Islanders, and to acknowledge our Cook Island ways and traditions around water, to include a section that prohibits the sale to or investment from any foreign buyers, and to ensure that there is no privatisation of our water rights. To include a section that protects the rights of Cook Islanders to their own artesian wells, streams and rainwater tanks, and to ensure the authority cannot impede their access to or control use around this. And most important of all, to future-proof this to protect those rights for our children and their children to come. So my question is, will you, Honourable Minister Mark Brown, future Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, for your people in Tatou Vai and your people who are in here tonight and those who are watching from home, will you retract that bill so that we can write a new bill and to take into account all the concerns that people have brought forward? If you can please answer with a yes or no.
No.
Thank you.
If I can explain, but I'll let Brian explain. Thank you.
Brian Mason, Chair, Tatou Vai. The 2 points made are good. I don't think they require the retraction of the bill, but they certainly require some amending. The first is to prevent private owners. Now, that can be put in the bill, but the reality is nobody is ever going to buy this water authority. There's two main reasons for that. First of all, the statute requires that it cannot make a profit, and then you could say, well, the government can change that. But the second thing is that this water authority cannot work without the cooperation of the landowners. If this water authority is sold, I anticipate within days the landowners are not going to cooperate. We don't own anything. We only own a few trucks and a photocopier. And that's all we'll probably ever own. Everything we use, everything we rely on, is on landowners' land. So it doesn't work if you don't like the authority. And I just have to admit that. The second issue is that about the private use of water. It is correct, the people's criticisms of what I drafted as being too broad. And that I've changed, and I hope when the amended bill, you see it, that you look at it and look at the drafting. Because one of the things I'd say is that people have come up at public meetings with very good ideas about how the wording should be improved. But essentially it's been changed so that any interference with private use of water only arises if it might compromise the network. So, for example, if somebody's using private water and it's causing pig effluent to get into the stream and get into the pipes, then we need something to deal with that. But if people aren't interfering with the network, there is no reason to interfere with their private use of water. So that's what has changed, and I hope that addresses the concern.
Thank you, Brian. Now, next speaker, Michelle.
Kia ora, my name is Michelle Oberg. I am a landowner on 15R and 15N. If I could get you to turn to page 32. Now, in 2018, I partitioned my share on 15N, 1.2 hectares. And when the water was put up, the intake was going up, I had already secured my land. I knew where my peg was, and the intake went on my land, and the settling tank was actually moved onto my land as well. Now, because I have partitioned that land, I am not entitled to any other land on N. 15N, Rua Moana, is 30 hectares. It's not 5 hectares, it's 30. We are a small family, and each of our family has a share on that land. But what you've gone and done here is, when you're dealing with the catchments, is completely cut it out. I can't build on there. I can't do anything, and I can tell you why I can't build on there, because I'm next to the river. And because my share has gone by the river, you have put in a clause, which is clause 24, saying that if I want to build, I have to now go to the committee you want to call and request them to approve me to build on the land. What I'm asking you for, and I've spent thousands of dollars doing this, and I intended to build up there. I was going to do a reserve on the left-hand side and build on the right. So what I want to know is, what is your boundary next to the water that I cannot go next? I want to know how far I have to be away from the water line in order to build. I want to know the distance.
Brian Mason, Tatou Vai, Chairman. There is no restriction that involves distance from the river. The issue is, does the development compromise the water? It doesn't prohibit development. It doesn't require somebody to get consent for a development. It only requires that consent if it may compromise the water. Now, it's probably more likely that somebody would need the approval to have pigs than it is to build a house. And the reason for that is because a house does not of itself create effluent that might infect the water. Possibly you might need the approval of the catchment committee for the septic tank, but the septic tank itself is covered by the regulations for septic tanks. So consequently, I wouldn't necessarily expect that development to affect the water.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think that's probably something that can be followed up more with the project team. So if there's no other speakers, I see Wayne and this mama over here, and then Auntie June. Okay, Wayne first, and then
Good on everybody. Thank you very much. It won't be very long. I've already spoken at Sinai Hall, and I'm very glad to see that at least the government's adjustable and flexible, and that's why we're here today, 48 hours after you've done the first presentation. That was well done, guys. That's not bad thinking on the hop. That's pretty cool. But it also tells me that somebody hasn't done their homework, have they? So I actually chastise you a little bit for that. Because honestly, this kind of stuff here, this is our lifeblood. Every single person in the Cook Islands depends on water. No water, no life. Hence why the growers are very concerned and everybody else is very concerned. Just a moment, please. You have fallen down. And I'm sorry about that because myself as an individual, as a Cook Islander, indigenous to these islands here, I count on you. Like Justine said before, we all count on you guys. We put our faith in you. We ask you, don't let us down. But I'm sorry today that past governments and present governments pretty much have let us down. They've done some good things for us, but overall, we as a people have suffered. So here we are today. We are asking you questions, but actually our questions are protests. We are protesting against your decision-making procedure. We are not protesting against what you are trying to achieve. We applaud you for that. We will raise you above our shoulders for that. But the methodology, the terminology, oh my God. What's that? What did I hear? $1.8 million in salary alone? And then 1.2 to actually get the job done? Something's wrong here. Myself personally, in business, because this is what we're talking about here, this is the business of water. Even though Brian Mason always refers to this as a non-profit organisation. Fair enough, it's a non-profit organisation. A lot of our people here have been asking for assurances, guarantees for the future, long after our eyes are closed. What assurances do we have that the promises you make today will stay good tomorrow? Because this stuff, we really, really need to work this out to the benefit of all. The governing body, the people who are consuming all this stuff. This water authority that you're creating, for now, you're saying to us that it has no value whatsoever. However, that's the authority. Question here is, you've got Tatou Vai. Now, it's pretty confusing when everybody uses TTV and TMV and, oh my God, ACDC. What the hell? DC. What? Is that a language? Can we please try and simplify this stuff? Because we have different authorities here. Tatou Vai, the way it's presented, is that they are the ultimate authority. However, when you read the fine print, they don't have the last authority. The actual authority, the way it's written out, and the way, if you follow it step by step, actually resides with the Minister of the Parliament, the Minister responsible for the water. The catchment committees, which is a token gift from the government, which means really nothing. That's my way of thinking, that's my opinion. It's democracy, I'm allowed to say what I say. As long as I don't swear and whatever, offend people. The Tatou Vai manages, oversees the whole thing and makes recommendations to the Minister. The Minister then takes it to the Crown, to the QR. And the QR, he or she, and maybe a she in the future, he's hoping, is not a scientist, doesn't have all the technology and the know-how to make decisions independently. All they can do is go on the recommendation of the minister. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to politics. Everything comes back to them. All the decision making, all the charges, all the regulations, all of it. The appointments of people on the board. People have asked, myself included on Monday, people here today have asked, include the landowners on the boards that matter. Catchment committees, I'm not saying are nothing, but they are like a footnote at the bottom of the page. The ones who really matter are up the top there at the title. And that's where we need to be because it's our land. It's all our land. There is no, I've always had an issue with the word uninvestigated, undiscovered. Not in our language. We all know where our roots come from. They all come from the very, very tall mountains there. All of us. Even the ones who deny it. Go trace your history. Check your family, you'll find where they came from. So all those lands belong to us. What we're asking you, I know you have said that it is not an asset, but however, it can become a blue sky, a telecom, now a Vodafone. It was public property. It was a utility. It was paid for by the Cook Islanders. We bought and paid that. The government was the vehicle that was used to purchase this. In the end, it became privatized. We lost out. What is to say, and that's what we're asking here, that's what some people have asked, give us a guarantee, put it in the act, that it will never be sold, ever. Because as you can see, with the draft that you have here, the proposals that you have here, it is not working for us. Because we have no reassurances, we have no guarantees. Because when we look at our European history is when the judiciary came in. The kings, the queens, and all that. They came in then. We had our tables and everything, and we have a different hierarchy in the past before then.
Thank you, Wayne. You can
all we're asking you is please put it down in black and white. You keep denying us that. You keep saying to us that, you know, we don't have any assets, we don't have any assets. Well, excuse me, I don't believe
Maybe
that.
if I can explain, Wayne, how it's going to work. Tim mentioned about what he called an enduring agreement. Now,
Yes, he did.
That's stronger than the Act. An Act can be changed by any government, any parliament. So putting it in the Act is not that strong, but an enduring agreement is between landowners and the government. And nothing can change unless both parties agree to it. And that's the document that Tim was talking about. So that's the assurance.
That's the assurance. Black and white, love to see it. However, I do ask again, reiterate that we have a say on the board. If you've got 5 to 7 people up there on that board, then at least 2 must be represented by the landowners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne.
Kia ora to the table and to everyone. My name is Kiliora Ona Ariki, and I am proud to say that I am a returning Cook Islander after many years. I represent a number of landowners, and I speak on their behalf and have the right to speak on their behalf as being their power of attorney. I agree with a lot of the speakers previously that the bill does need to be amended. Now, I am not a lawyer, but I love to read. And I've had a quick read of this, and it concerns me, this particular article, if everyone wants to turn to clause 63, part 8, and if you actually have a look at the liability of the authority limited, what I do have a concern about is that actually the word is actually wording, and I have a fascination for words. And that, just like Justine's, the word must and may makes a huge big difference, especially if it's going to be part of the law, our law. The word I am really concerned about, because some of the issues that's actually on this, I've actually also been affected by it. And that word is actually negligent. So my question is, if the authority, as it states here, that you are not going to be negligent for all what you've listed here, I'm not going to read all of them because we can all read, A, B, C and D. So my question is to the table, then who is liable? Because it clearly states here that the authority will not be negligent should the following A, B, C and D actually occur. So who is? And it's those matters that I'm concerned about should this bill go ahead. And like Justine's and many others have stated, that this bill can't go through. If you all take it home and have a clear read of every single word that has been written in here, it has a huge big impact, not only now, but also for our future generations. As a newly grandmother that I'm very proud of, this is eventually going to affect my granddaughter and her generations to come. This law will be in effect for many years. So it's our responsibility, everyone here, to read our articles carefully, to read the wordings, and if you don't understand them, then talk to people that can, because it has a huge, big impact on us. So, to the table, 63, clause 63. Then who then do we go to? Who then will be liable? Because it's stating here that the authority, even if there's negligency, then who is then? Can somebody answer that for me? Or if he can't do it now, then that's okay, because I can wait.
I'd be happy to answer that because the question was asked last night. Now, this bill, because it's more controversial and gone to the public, has caused people to realise that government does something in acts which most people take little notice of. There's nothing new. First of all, there's nothing new in this provision because, first of all, either the taxpayer pays. I mean, ultimately, it's either the person who's the victim of the negligence or the taxpayer. But, for example, the Telecommunications Act, which has only just been repealed, since 1989 has said no action or proceedings for compensation may lie against the company or an officer or employee thereof by reason of any delay, default, error, omission or loss, whether negligent or otherwise, in the transmission, reception or delivery of a telecommunication service or message. And that's repeated in also other legislation. It raises a very valid issue, but it is a wider issue, and that is whether governments should face some liability and whether they should be insuring for that liability. So the question you have raised is a very valid one, but it applies not just to this bill, it applies to quite a number of government acts. And the concern, of course, is not so much the small thing that might occur, but if a major incident occurs, for example, one of the dams, let's say, broke, and it caused loss of life, or if the water, there was an error, like there was in Havelock North, where 7 people died and about 20 suffered injury in New Zealand, after the system had been running for 23 years, the potential liability for the government is colossal, and the people who pay for that is the taxpayer. So there's arguments going both sides. It's a general argument right across government in all acts, and I would remind you that the exemption that Telecom had was a private company that was 60% owned by foreigners. So I think you've got a very good point, and you may be right, but it's part of a much wider debate.
Thank you for answering that. In regards to the relevance of the words negligent, I'm quite aware of different acts. But this is why it's really, really important that the community actually pays a lot more close attention when bills have actually been introduced and that. Because we already know previous governments, not just here, all around the world, that there's always a safeguard. And in fact, it's actually always the government that protects themselves and not the people. And there's been evidence around the world of this. There's even evidence here where simple Joe can't go suing the government because of simple things like this, of wordings like this. Because these wordings actually don't protect the people, it actually protects the government. And yet it concerns me because the government actually is supposed to be protecting us.
Perhaps I could...
So we do need...
Yep. Perhaps I should add that I've asked the Crown Law Office and the Solicitor General to look at it because of the concerns expressed by the public.
Okay. So to my closing, I do want to say that the people at the table, you are working really, really hard, and you have put up a lot with tonight, with all our questions, and the other nights as well. But I do want to emphasise that it's really, really important that you remind yourself that you actually work for the people of the Cook Islands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimera. Andy June.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Ore e paotu e te mui. First, I'd like to thank the government for trying to do a good job to get us clean water. Sorry, tōku ingo, I'm June Bowdenay. And first of all, I'd like to say that all the people of Takitumu, from one end to the other, are landowners of the motorway. Not just one or two or three, all the people of Takitumu. They all came through Pa and Kainaku, Manawaro, Tangiao, Koet. I just look forward to the day I get some clean water. Now, so far, a lot of points have been raised tonight. I won't repeat it. We talk about the waste of water will cost you. My concern at the beginning is we went from 26 million to over 100 million. Is that a waste of money? Or, to me, it's an exorbitant amount of money. So I'm going to ask that we are careful from now on to make sure we don't have extra waste of money. And I also want to raise, there are 4 authorities now of the government. We have the Apunga, we have the Vodafone, we have the infrastructure, and now we have the motorway. So I just want to say that we don't dig up the road, we reseal the road, then we dig up the road to put the water, not the water pipe, the phone line, and then we seal it. Then we dig up the road for whatever. But because there is no work plan between the 4 authorities, and I hope that our motorway will sit down and do a proper plan with the others, that we don't go and keep digging our road. And who's going to pay the money? Ko tātou. Nā tātou e tūtaki. And so I really would like to ask the government and kopu tangata, the etu tangata, work together, because if we can work together in a peaceful manner, a cooperative manner, to get this project as quickly as possible. That's what I would like to ask. To see, to work in harmony, not yelling and screaming at each other. Now, let me go back to 100 years ago. I think our forefathers gave the land to the Crown for our water. Would that be correct? Today, we are arguing with the Crown about where we're going to store the water to bring to us, to our home. I find this Hey, I don't know. I'm not going to explain the reason. I think you know what I'm talking about. It shows us, are we being greedy? All the government wants to do is to finish the job and send the water to us, but we do want to be recognized as well, I won't say just the landowners, but let's work together with these people. And the longer we argue, the longer we delay the project, getting the water to our home. If we go to Avarua, you pay your petrol. To get the water from there, I'm talking about clean water. To our house, to my house, I don't mind paying 5 cents, $5, whatever the cost is going to be. Come on, Tatou. Don't expect who's going to pay to bring the water pipes along our road. We have seen it cost so many, not thousands, millions of dollars. Hey, we have to pay something. Don't expect the government said it's going to be free. Of course the water is free. It's from God. But I can't understand that we are forgetting what our ancestors have contributed to the Crown for the benefit of the Ichitangata. And Kemanui.
Thank you, Angie June. Notia, you're right. The landowners didn't give the land to the government. They allowed the government to use their land. It still belongs to the landowners. Norungai diao paper de ko yene wutu mere Papa George. Notia. Katoa o te muni te aka po e te aka o to tātou pū paper pera katoa te o paper ring main ka tere te rira te iwanga uru milion tara ko tuta ki tātou i te muni te kai o i runga i te iwanga uru milion tara i runga uru māturu milion ko te katoa anga ko ochi a tātou te tutaki ko tauturu mai te nuchi reini a tātou ko te au paper tā tātou e ki te o kiriti e te ngara o ki tēnei mai te anganga te contractor ti rawi te anganga mua i te tāmuanga i te au paipa ere kāre tāna anganga i makoroa. Te pai nei mātou i rātou ki te akawaanga, ua kiriti mai mātou i te au paipa, ko tuku te mea o e contractor o te rawi te anganga. I te tūtaki i te au paipa o, nā te nuti rein tirira, kare nā tātou. Kare a tātou muni a kautunga i girunga i a tātou, o te akamako anga i te anganga. So, nā roa te akamara mai te ki tātou. So I had the next speaker, ko Papa Wakapura, e jiria haru mai aio, te akaraneo ko Raina matai po, e jiria, was that you, Anna, that I saw? Yes, and Anna Tira. So Papa.
Kia ora everyone in the front there. There's the water catchment for Tupapa. These names that I'm looking at, they don't ring a bell in Tupapa because they don't have no marae there. I stay in between Marae Koroa and Tamakinu. So, here's my question. What if one day that these people have been found that they are not the landowners of that catchment of Tupapa? Brian? I believe this is your question, mate. What happens if these landowners here have been identified as not the true landowners? Do they get penalised with $100,000 or $300,000, just like the people?
Yeah, it's not in here, mate. The question was, he's asking, on these lands in the Tupapa catchment, he's saying if the landowners that have been identified on the Tupapa land catchment
on
are not
bill,
not the true landowners.
Are not the true landowners.
Are not the true landowners on this bill.
Yeah, so
for that catchment in Tupapa.
Well, if they're not, what? Oh, no.
Sorry?
He's asking if the landowner
Yeah. Brian. Brian, I'll say it again, mate.
No.
Brian.
I'm sorry.
Oh, mate.
I can't
Yeah. I'll start again there, buddy.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Okay. In Tupapa, okay, these landowners have claimed themselves to be the landowners of the catchment in Tupapa. Now, what if one day they are found not to be the landowners of this catchment in Tupapa? Because I stay between Marae Tamakino and Marae Koroa. And Wakapora Marae goes from there right up to that mountain. So, do they get penalised $100,000, $300,000 for obtaining by deception?
No.
They don't?
No.
Okay. Okay. This uninvestigated land in Ararang. No. It's not uninvestigated. That's all Iototoro land, mate. Up on the mountain there, that's all Iototoro land in Ararang.
The Rutaki intake.
Oh, yeah, Natoi.
Yeah.
Natoi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because, buddy, there's no such thing as uninvestigated land like my comrade Wayne Mitchell said.
No, it's customary land, but
Yeah.
it's called, the term used by lawyers is uninvestigated land, but you are correct, the Cook Islands Act refers to it as customary land.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Keep up the good work. And like the team says, premature.
Thank you. Thank you, Wakapora. Raina, oh, sorry, Andy? Oh. Okay, Anna, first, ladies first. Gentlemen.
Thank you. I just have a couple of quick questions. My name is Anna Chida and I'm from Matavera. I am from the landowning tribes and a number of intakes. The first question that I have is in terms of next steps and procedures. I didn't quite hear whether we would have the opportunity to look at the revised bill. That is my first question, before the actual deadline of the submissions.
Yes, that is the intention, to bring it back to the public. I would like to show it to the public after we've gone through the revisions and heard all the submissions that have come in.
Thank you. My second question relates to the bill going before Parliament. When is there a sense of timing when this will happen, when the bill will be presented to Parliament again?
The committee is required to report to Parliament on their findings on the bill by the 30th of September. Yeah. From there, Parliament will decide what action it takes, whether to defer it or reject it or undertake further consultation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Andy?
Kia ora nā. Ko Andy toko ingoa. We stay in Turangi currently, but we have... Sorry. But our section the family has given us is up Avana Valley. I actually have a little visual to go with what I would like to talk about. Whereabouts is everything controlled from? Who's controlling the presentation?
We are.
Over there, okay.
Is this going to take long?
It's a picture.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
It's in, it says Takitumu.
Takitumu. Okay.
Takitumu and then catchment area.
Enterprise that out first.
So it won't take long, Minister Brown. It's a picture. And it shows the catchment area as defined at the back of the bill. The total catchment area, which was a little bit hard to make out earlier on with our presentation from Adrian. I have one question relating to that once we get the picture up. But I would like to address Mr. Mason on a couple of points. It might help other people too understand about this notion of cost. So one point, Mr. Mason, in relation, there's a folder called Takitumu in there.
What's it called again, Andy?
Takitumu, just inside that folder, and then there's today's date, which is 20/07/30.
Oh.
catchment.
And it says catchment.
Oh, what's that not working?
If you throw it in a browser window, it might open there, okay?
She's putting it on.
So one point is about how the water gets around the island. Gregory Longwin might correct me on this. A big part of this new system are those tanks that we have. What those tanks do is create a little bit more pressure to get the water up to our 30-metre mark and to get it around the island. Now the thing with gravity is we currently do not get to we don't get to a charge levied against us for gravity. We're actually taking advantage of another one of God's gifts to drive this water around the island. The other point is the idea of having to manage the water in the ground and in the streams. It does go into the pipes at the bottom of this catchment area. So the provision that is made for regulating these other sources of water needs to be restricted, as was said, to the idea of any impact upon the network and the function of the network. I think it's a minor detail, but it will help prevent misunderstanding in future. If we can just reduce it in and say, if a water source is seen to impact upon the network, then Tatou Vai can take remedial action.
Yeah,
no pictures?
Do you want me to answer
sorry,
that?
Brian.
Yeah, we're just trying to get the picture up. But Andy, microphone's gone too.
He's here.
Yeah, we agree with that. We agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had in broad terms agreed it's just bringing it in and making it kind of local to the network itself. The wording, as it has discussed tonight, was a little bit too broad still. I do have some solutions though.
Yep.
Okay. Sam Napa Senior talked us through the history of paying for our infrastructure development, and he mentioned a figure of $14 million on alcohol on the first night in Sinai Hall. We also have an issue of tourism on the island changing the demands on our infrastructure. Now, there's a good connection there between our tourism and our alcohol consumption. Has the board investigated other sources of revenue to support this infrastructure aside from its own operation? Anyone?
I'm going to...
Yes, we have.
Hello?
Any of those you care to mention?
The government has.
Any that come to mind?
It's either do we do it the way we're doing it now, as Tim mentioned, through general taxation, pay it. Other ways are through other forms of taxation, such as in the departure tax. Those were two that were considered as ways to cover costs of the operations of Tatou Vai. But the important factor to take into account was how do we protect the water from people who want to waste it?
I don't agree with the notion of waste. So I'll go back to the concept that we have here, which is we have variable demand and alcohol. Making a connection between the two and charging a duty on the alcohol that comes to the island in order to fund our water infrastructure. This would automatically be geared to match tourism. We would not have to worry about a lack of tourism. The more tourists we have, the more alcohol that's consumed, the more money we have available for our infrastructure. So it's just a possible solution, because I think we've pretty much destroyed the business model that was put forward in the bill. Taking away the fixed connection rates, taking away this notion of wastage until we know what we actually need to use. We have no way of actually making sure that this new authority can sustain itself. It seems to me that a lot more work has to go into the economics of this. Perhaps the Minister for Finance could lead such work to ensure that, in fact, when we hit the ground running, some more figures are there and we figured out how much needs to be gathered, what our revenue requirements are. And I propose that things like this, alternative sources of revenue, rather than through operation, might be more suitable. It doesn't look like my picture's coming up. But Adrian, you may be able to help me. Okay, thank you. This is the total catchment area that's going to be set aside, that big blue area. The smaller, darker blue area is Avana, 243 hectares. If it looks to you at around maybe 20% of the island, that's what it looks like to me as well. But Adrian, you may be able to tell me what the total area that's going to be put into catchment there and become essentially unavailable to landowners is.
Probably just a clarification, that's not the area that's going to be put into catchment. That is our current catchment.
No, that is taken from the back of the bill, and it's taken from the shaded red areas, Minister Brown.
That is
which
the
catchment.
natural catchment where the water flows in the streams, is all of that area.
That is the entire catchment area. Yes? Yeah, the little coloured in bit is just Avana.
Yeah.
Yep. We agreeing? Okay, yeah, that's the entire catchment area. But Adrian, do you have any idea what the total area that's set aside will be?
Yeah, the map you've shown on there with the light blue and white area shows the total catchment area. But yeah, we started working on it. We haven't got the figure yet here. The total area.
Any ballpark?
One we calculated the other night was Ngatoi is about 51 hectares.
51 hectares.
For Ngatoi.
For Ngatoi?
Yeah.
Okay. So by my guess, I've got about 1,000 to 1,200 hectares of land set aside. There are many parts in this new bill where there's been inadequate work done in connecting it into the rest of our legislative structures. Under the Environment Act, development in that area is already regulated. These catchment committees that come in are still subject to the Environment Act because that is seriously sloping land. It only needs to be 1 in 10. So it feels to me like the notions of these catchment committees, they cannot function without regard to the Environment Act. The other act or regulation under the Environment Act is the Tatou Vai water catchment regulations. On that drive, Walter, there's a PDF of the catchment regulations for Tatou Vai. If you could open that. Now this is another solution. Okay, this is earlier work that was done 2003 to 2006 by the committee that Teddy is now chairperson of. This work took 3 years to do. A lot of work was put into this, and it started with the community. It started by recognising the people who use the water. It's a PDF, is it?
Yeah, what's it called again?
It starts with Takuwaini, I think.
Takuwaini,
yeah. I just wanted to show you the interpretations at the beginning of this document.
Try it over, eh? Say it, mate. Sorry, Andy. Don't know what our problem is.
I can read them if they don't come out. Some of the ideas that are embedded in this regulation. Pūtapiri, the person elected by the people of Takuwaini and endorsed by the Ariki as the village leader for the village of Takuwaini. These are the members of people involved in managing the catchment area. Rahui, a restriction on certain activities in a certain area for a certain time and purpose as determined by a traditional leader or leaders of a village area. So this is page 4.
Okay.
Wiariki means traditional chiefly title holders of Karaka, Ariki, Makia Ariki, and Vakakatini Ariki. Utanga means a monetary penalty applied pursuant to a custom that does not include a fine or imprisonment. These fundamental principles have already been documented. They are excellent starting points for what you propose to do with this catchment committee. They are regulations that exist under the Environment Act. I don't understand why none of these have made their way into these new catchment committees. This is a very solid starting point. So I just would like to raise it and offer it back to the Select Committee for consideration. I believe that maybe Paul Napa was involved in some of this work as well. and he may be able to help with any interpretation of these documents. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. Sorry.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Those are good suggestions here, and certainly we'll look at that, both from the economic side, but also as the regulations for the catchments. It's good to see Tatou Vai leading the way. Thank you.
But they don't have a rugby
Raina
team.
Matayabo.
Thank you. Kia ora ki ngā kai, Raina Matayabo. I shall be brief as I jotted down 5 points. First one, catchment landowners. I reckon they should be compensated because those areas been gifted to you since 1800 or 1700. You know, you've got to be friendly now, make a fair deal with the landowners and give them compensation. Because Donald Trump always says, makes a fair deal. Second point, I know safe drinking water matters. One, I would like the water to be chlorinated. Two, the water here fluoridated. In the article this week, 54% water catchment in New Zealand are fluoridated. The remaining, the decay missing teeth in those rest areas is going up. And in the Cook Islands, 5-year-old, man, you don't want to look inside. So, with the infrastructure at the Minita, after chlorination, fluoridation must happen in my lifetime. And on the tariff, because Minita on the radio, within 2 years after this act is action, we will start paying. Well, time is changing. Somehow we have to pay, but I hope it's not in my lifetime. Third point, directors. The management of the Tatou Vai, 2.8 million a year. 2.8. I hope my calculation is not right, because I didn't take mathematics at school. 1.4 to 1.6, the directors and the staff. Yeah. My area 1.4 million. Oh my goodness. May compensate the landowners, then all those directors will do voluntary work. I'm sure so pay them the minimum wage at the minute, $8 an hour. Fourth point, the dam. I kind of like that idea. And yet I'm older than him, he's younger than me, but he had a brilliant idea to build a dam. I reckon that's a bloody good idea. On Rarotonga, we should build 3 dams to feed the catchment, the infrastructure in progress. Not our rivers now, they maro to Rokia. Oh my goodness, frequent tirapia, the cold the Kauai. How do you get away? Poro Diarongamia, the member parliament over to Adamay, Patia Korai, so they go home empty handed. I reckon the dam will make you take the monga, Chukumairia by limited water, the creek, and the Moana. I'll give you with catchment. Yeah. Chukumaira, you the Kauai, the Paitaro, Aderotantaro. Okay? Right. Last point, the deeds. I heard about a deed, 2018, yeah. I hope this would be affordable, user-friendly, Yeah, user-friendly. I hope it's not like the same one in 2015. I mean 1915. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about because it affects our customary rights, customary land. You're talking about customary land. Please compensate the landowners. Thank you. Good night, everybody. See you next time.
Medigi mate raina matayo po. Te agaraneo kare tanga tatoi te katutoi te po. Te o te taopenga ta tatou tutoi te po. To tatou o pupai pa ere yuto te maunga kuochi te agatu. Kua kuochi te o ngā katoto tai o toi ka tesu ki te au apinga ere. Mua ki te contractor ka oki mai te project ki te company o to Tatou Vai. So te cheki o nei tuatou me Yochi te o mea manamanta rikiriki pōrua, ka rau ki te taanganga i tā tātou, tō tātou pūpai pa au, ki riro mai e wai mā te ka te mai ki roto i tō tātou paipa ere. Nā ko te tātou ki te opengo tō tātou uipanga i te pō, te rau ka ni aku te akamita ki a tātou kātou tō ti no mai te roa i te uipanga i te pō, ko tō te tuku mai tō koto manako, manako i te turu, manako i te pātoi, manako i te akataui, manako i te akatantan. Thank you very much. All of your comments have been taken on board. It's recorded in the Hansard. The committee will endeavour to hold individual meetings now that the request has been made, not just from the intake landowners, but from the catchment landowners. There will be a requirement then to have 10 separate landowner meetings with each of the intake groups, families, from the catchments and the intake. So it will probably require a large area for us to accommodate all of the landowners, but we will have them separately.
Could I please suggest at the first meeting, all the landowners in one place, so we all hear the same thing at the same time, please, the first one, and then make it the small one.
I'm more than happy to have one meeting rather than 10 meetings. I'll be more than happy to do if landowners are in agreement, because I'm very mindful and respectful of each landowner's valley. There are different issues associated with each valley, and they like to bring their own individual concerns to the fore. But this attempt, these last 3 meetings, was to hold it on a vaka basis. The invitations went out to the individual landowners on the intakes to be here, and the general invitation to the landowners of the catchment areas, which is a much wider group of landowners. So we will certainly consider that if all of the landowners are in agreement, but I think many of the landowners wanted to have their own individual landowner meeting.
Initial one altogether, then the 10. So you get all the details that are common to the 10 at once. Everybody hears it at the same time. And then the individual meetings will have to take place, but they'll be shorter because you don't have to repeat.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that into account as well. Again, our thanks for all of you who stayed behind for such a long meeting to get through this very important bill. And we will definitely endeavour to have not just the landowner meetings, but also the various stakeholder groups who have booked the time, the agricultural groups and others who wanted to have special meetings with the select committee. Me tiroto nei tō tātou papa oramitua, I rau kei te rawe tō tātou pure, me kāre, e oramitua lea tō mātou, I mua nei, nāna e rawe mai tō tātou pure kauchi.
Tō tātou irawa kōti, John 3 verses 2. Dear friends, I pray that you may enjoy good health and all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. Pura tātou ki te atua, let us pray. Kia ka miti kia koe tō mātumu tuatua. No tā au tia ki anga, tā au harata ki anga I mātou I roto I te au tutua tā mātou I tutua ake nei. Tō mātou manamanta, e te aka kouni mātou I te reira. Ki rira te au harataki I te aka tina mo metaki te rira, e metaki no mātou kātou toa no te iti tāta kuki aere nei. Oronga mai te aka ngāru I anga tau no mātou, aka kore mai tā mātou ara kia ora mātou I a koe. Amen.